My husband drained our retirement account for his mistress while I fought cancer. He spent our 15 years of savings on luxury hotels and diamond jewelry for her. When he finally came home from their Aspen getaway, he found something that left him speechless. Not a broken wife begging him to stay, but a transformed home and the financial reckoning he never saw coming. The terminal diagnosis came on a Tuesday. Stage 3 breast cancer, the doctor had said, her voice gentle but firm. I'd need aggressive treatment, surgery, chemotherapy. My chances were good, but the road would be hard. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I remembered nodding, my mind already racing ahead to practical matters, insurance paperwork, medical leave from my job, how to tell my friends and family. But most of all, I thought about Dean, my husband of 17 years. My rock, the man who'd promised in sickness and in health. Don't worry, I told the doctor with a certainty I didn't truly feel. I have an amazing support system. That night, I sat at our kitchen island, a glass of untouched wine before me, waiting for Dean to come home so I could tell him. I'd rehearsed the words a dozen times. I'd even prepared for his shock, his fear, emotions I was still grappling with myself. What I hadn't prepared for was his distraction. Hey, Piper, he said as he rushed through the door, barely glancing my way. Sorry I'm late. Budget meeting. Ran long. He loosened his tie, dropped his briefcase by the door, breaking our long-standing rule about keeping the entryway clear, and headed straight for the fridge. I watched him, this familiar stranger, as he cracked open a beer and checked his phone. There was a time when he would have noticed immediately that something was wrong. He would have seen it in my eyes, in the rigid way I held my shoulders, in the untouched wine. I never left wine untouched. Dean, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. I need to talk to you. He glanced up, annoyed at first, then registering something in my tone. What's wrong? Is it your mom? No, it's me. I took a deep breath. I have cancer. Time seemed to stop as the words hung in the air between us. I watched his face, waiting for the shock, the concern, the rush of questions. Instead, what I saw was something entirely different. Something that would haunt me in the months to come. Relief. Brief, but unmistakable. As if I'd given him an unexpected gift. It was gone in an instant, replaced by what looked like appropriate concern, but I'd seen it. Something deep inside me, some primitive instinct for self-preservation, took note. Cancer? He repeated, setting down his phone at last. What? What kind? How serious? I told him everything the doctor had told me. Treatment options, success rates, the difficult months ahead. As I spoke, he moved around the island and put his arms around me. And for a moment, I felt like maybe I'd imagined that flash of relief. This was Dean, after all. My Dean. We'll get through this, he said, his voice muffled against my hair. I promise. I believed him. Or I wanted to. That night, as I lay awake beside him, his breathing too measured, too controlled for real sleep, I made a promise to myself. I would fight this disease with everything I had. I would survive. Not just for me, but for us. For the life we'd built over 17 years of marriage. I didn't know then that I was already fighting two battles. One against the cancer growing, inside my body, and another against a betrayal I hadn't yet uncovered. The first signs were subtle. Dean started working late more often. Understandable, I thought, with the extra financial pressure my treatment would bring. Our health insurance was good, but not perfect. There would be out-of-pocket costs, unpaid leave to consider. Don't worry. About work, I told him one evening as he prepared to leave for what he claimed was an emergency client meeting. I can still handle some projects remotely during treatment. My consulting business had always been flexible, one of the reasons we'd decided not to have children. We'd prioritized career growth and financial security instead, building a substantial nest egg for early retirement. The mountain cabin we'd always dreamed of, the European tours we'd planned for our 50s. No, no, Dean said quickly. You focus on getting better. I've got everything under control. He kissed my forehead. Not my lips, I noticed, and headed out the door. 3 weeks into my chemotherapy, I discovered the first withdrawal. I was paying bills, a task that had always been mine in our marriage, when I noticed an alert from our bank. A transfer of $5,000 from our joint savings account to Dean's personal checking. Not unusual in itself. We moved money between accounts all the time. But the timing struck me as odd. We'd just paid the first round of medical bills the previous week. I shot him a quick text. Saw the transfer from savings. Everything okay? His response came suspiciously fast. Just moving some funds around for tax purposes. I'll explain later. But later never came. When I brought it up that evening, he launched into a complex explanation about tax liabilities and investment strategies that made my already chemo-foggy brain shut down. I let it go, trusting him as I always had with the more complex aspects of our finances. That was my first mistake. By the time I lost my hair, I'd also lost track of nearly $30,000 from our accounts. Each time I questioned a withdrawal, Dean had a ready explanation. Each time I chose to believe him. Fighting cancer took everything I had. I didn't have the energy to fight my husband, too. Then came the day I found the receipt. I was looking for a prescription that had been delivered while I was at treatment. Dean had signed for it but couldn't remember where he'd put it. I searched his home office, rifling through the stack of papers on his desk. The Tiffany & Cumber receipt was for a diamond bracelet, $22,500, purchased 2 days earlier on our joint credit card. My birthday was months away. Our anniversary had just passed with only a modestly priced scarf from Dean. We should be practical with all the medical expenses, he'd said. I stood there, my body weak from treatment, but my mind suddenly, painfully clear. In 17 years of marriage, Dean had never spent that kind of money on jewelry for me, never even close. And now, while I was fighting for my life, while we were supposedly concerned about medical expenses, he had spent more than most people make in months on… What? For whom? The questions crystallized in my mind with a clarity that had eluded me for weeks. I folded the receipt carefully and put it in my pocket. Then, instead of confronting Dean immediately, I did something else entirely. I began to investigate. Our home had always been our sanctuary. A modern craftsman in a quiet Seattle suburb, with large windows that let in the gray-blue light even on rainy days. We'd bought it 10 years ago, spending months renovating it ourselves on weekends, Dean handling the carpentry while I chose finishes and colors. Every corner held a memory of laughter, of shared dreams, of the life we'd built together. Now, as I moved through our house with new awareness, everything looked different. The framed photos on the wall, Dean and me in Maui on our 10th anniversary, hiking in Olympic National Park, celebrating my promotion to senior consultant, felt like artifacts from another life. I stopped before the largest one, taken on the day we closed on the house. We were standing on the front porch, Dean's arm around my waist, both of us beaming with pride and possibility. We did it, he'd whispered into my hair that day. Our forever home. Forever. The word echoed hollowly now. I ran my fingers along the smooth granite countertops in the kitchen that Dean had insisted on, despite the expense. We're investing in our future, he'd said. At the time, I'd loved his vision, his certainty. Now I wondered what else he'd been certain about while lying to my face. Our bedroom felt tainted. The California King, where we'd once lazily spent Sunday mornings reading and planning our next adventure, now seemed vast and cold. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I hadn't slept well since starting chemo, but lately it wasn't just the nausea or night sweats keeping me awake. It was the growing distance between Dean's side of the bed and mine, the way he waited until he thought I was asleep before coming to bed, the careful way he avoided touching me, as if my illness, or perhaps my suspicion, might be contagious. My reflection in the bathroom mirror stopped me short. I hardly recognized myself. My once thick chestnut hair was completely gone, my eyebrows thinning. My skin had a grayish undertone that no amount of blush could disguise. Dark circles shadowed my eyes, making them appear sunken in my too thin face. Was this why Dean had strayed? Because cancer had stolen not just my health but my beauty? The thought sent a surge of anger through me. At the cancer, at Dean, but mostly at myself for even wondering. As if his betrayal could be my fault. I opened the medicine cabinet, surveying the neat row of prescription bottles that chronicled my battle. Anti-nausea medication, pain relievers, sleeping pills, steroids to combat the inflammation, supplements to boost my depleted immune system. A chemical arsenal against an enemy I couldn't see but felt in every cell of my body. Dean's side of the cabinet remained largely unchanged: deodorant, shaving cream, the expensive cologne I'd given him last Christmas. Except there was less of it than there should have been. The bottle had been nearly full a month ago. Now it was half empty. Dean wasn't wearing cologne around me anymore. Beside the sink sat my jewelry box, a walnut case Dean had made for me on our 5th anniversary. I opened it, running my fingers over the modest collection inside. Silver earrings, my grandmother's pearl necklace, the sapphire pendant Dean had given me when I landed my first major client. No diamond bracelet worth $2,500. I closed the box gently, a cold certainty settling in my stomach. Whatever Dean had purchased at Tiffany's wasn't for me. His home office, where I'd found the receipt, now beckoned like a vault of secrets waiting to be unlocked. Dean had always been organized to the point of obsession about his paperwork. In the past, I'd teased him about it. Now I was counting on it. I sat in his ergonomic chair, feeling like an intruder in my own home. The desk was immaculate as always. Laptop centered perfectly, notebook and pen arranged at the precise angle Dean preferred, a single framed photo of us from our wedding day. I touched the silver frame, remembering how young and hopeful we'd been. 27 and 29 with no idea what lay ahead. The desk drawers were unlocked. Why would they be otherwise in our home, between husband and wife who supposedly had no secrets? The top drawer held the usual supplies: paper clips, Post-its, extra pens. The second contained hanging files with our household documents, mortgage statements, insurance policies, warranties for appliances. In the bottom drawer, I found what I was looking for: Dean's meticulous financial records. He kept digital copies of everything, of course, but Dean was old-fashioned about backup. Never trust technology completely, he always said. I pulled out the accordion file labeled Bank. Statements, personal. Inside were months of statements from his personal checking account, the one I knew about but rarely monitored, since we handled most expenses from our joint accounts. I'd always respected his financial independence, just as he'd respected mine. We each maintained small, separate accounts alongside our substantial joint savings, or so I'd thought. The most recent statement confirmed the $5,000 transfer from our joint savings. But it also showed something else: an immediate outgoing transfer of $4,800 to another account, one I didn't recognize. The account holder's name was visible only as A. Monroe. My hands trembled slightly as I continued through the statements. The pattern was clear and devastating. For at least 6 months, since before my diagnosis, Dean had been moving money from our joint savings into his personal account, then immediately transferring most of it elsewhere. Small amounts at first, $500 here, $1,000 there. Amounts that wouldn't trigger my attention if I happened to check our joint savings. But after my diagnosis, the transfers had increased dramatically in both frequency and amount. In total, nearly $75,000 had gone to this mysterious A. Monroe. $75,000. Almost half of what we'd set aside for our retirement cabin. Money we'd saved carefully over 15 years of marriage, skipping vacations some years, taking on extra projects, always with that shared dream in mind. I leaned back in the chair, the statement still clutched in my hand. The room seemed to blur around me, whether from tears or chemotherapy-induced vertigo, I couldn't tell. I breathed deeply, fighting for clarity. Think, Piper. Think, A. Monroe. The name meant nothing to me. None of our friends or Dean's colleagues had that name. It could be a business, an investment, something with a legitimate explanation. But deep down, I knew better. I returned the bank statements exactly as I'd found them and opened my laptop. A quick search for A. Monroe, Seattle, yielded nothing useful. I tried variations, combinations with Dean's name, but found nothing concrete. I needed more information. I needed to be smart about this. Outside, the afternoon light was fading, casting long shadows across the office. Dean would be home in a few hours. He'd been predictable lately, home by 7, distracted dinner conversation, work in his office until late, bed around midnight. A schedule I now understood was designed to minimize his time with me while maintaining the appearance of normalcy. I stood to leave the office, my gaze caught on the wedding photo again. The happiness in our expressions was unmistakable, genuine. Had he ever really loved me? Or had that too been a performance? I touched my bare scalp, feeling the unfamiliar contours of my head. The old Piper, with flowing hair and boundless energy, might have confronted Dean immediately, demanded answers through tears and accusations. But cancer had changed me in ways beyond the physical. I'd faced my mortality and found a core of steel I hadn't known existed. This new Piper would be strategic, methodical. I wouldn't just uncover Dean's betrayal, I would understand its full scope. And then I would decide what came next. The game had changed. Dean just didn't know it yet. I met Dean Wallace at a charity fundraiser for children's literacy. I was 27, he was 29. I'd been dragged there by my roommate Jenna, who insisted it would be good networking for my fledgling consulting business. Plus, she'd added with a wink, eligible bachelors love to show off their generosity. I'd rolled my eyes but agreed to go. Not for the bachelors, but because reading had saved me after my parents' divorce. Books had been my escape, my comfort, my teachers. The idea of helping provide that refuge to underprivileged children resonated deeply. The event was held at the Grand Hyatt downtown, all crystal chandeliers and champagne flutes. I felt out of place in my one designer dress, a splurge I'd justified as a business investment. I was lingering near a display of children's artwork when someone appeared at my elbow. "That one's my favorite," a voice said, indicating a painting of a red rocket ship soaring above a blue planet. I turned to find a tall man in a perfectly tailored suit, his dark hair just beginning to show threads of silver at the temples. His eyes were the warm brown of aged whiskey, crinkled at the corners from smiling. "Mine too," I replied. "It's hopeful." "How so?" he asked, genuinely curious. The artist saw beyond their circumstances, beyond even Earth. They imagined adventure, exploration, possibility. I shrugged. That's what books did for me as a kid. Showed me there was more out there than what I could immediately see. He studied me with interest. "I'm Dean Wallace," he said, extending his hand. "Piper Collins." His handshake was firm but not overbearing. When our hands parted, I felt a slight reluctance on both sides. "What brings you here tonight, Piper Collins, besides appreciating hopeful rocket ships?" I explained about my connection to literacy programs, and he shared that he was on the board of the foundation hosting the event. As an investment manager, he had both the financial means and the connections to make a significant impact. What should have been a brief conversation stretched into an hour, then two. We moved from children's art to our favorite books, our careers, our dreams. I found myself captivated not just by his obvious charm and success, but by his thoughtfulness, the way he listened intently, the passion with which he spoke about creating financial security that could open doors to what really mattered in life. Money isn't the end goal, he told me as we shared a quiet corner and flutes of champagne. It's what money allows you to do, to experience, to become. Financial freedom means having choices. By the time he asked for my number, I felt as though I'd known him for years rather than hours. Our first date was 3 days later, dinner at a small Italian restaurant where the owner knew Dean by name. Our second date was a weekend hike, followed by coffee in a tiny bookshop. By our fifth date, I knew I was falling in love. Dean was everything I hadn't known I was looking for. Stable where I was spontaneous, methodical where I was intuitive. He balanced my tendency to dive headfirst into new projects with careful consideration of long-term implications. For my part, I brought color and creativity into his precisely ordered world. "You make me see possibilities I never considered," he told me 6 months in, as we lay tangled together in his bed, making plans for a weekend trip to Portland. What had drawn me most to Dean wasn't his success or stability, though those were certainly attractive. It was the vision we created together, a partnership of equals, a life built on mutual respect, shared values, and absolute trust. Our courtship wasn't without challenges. Dean's parents, particularly his mother Suzanne, were less than thrilled with his choice. They'd had someone else in mind for their only son, someone from a good family, unlike my broken one, someone with old money, unlike my self-made status, someone who would prioritize being a wife and mother over career ambitions. "They'll come around," Dean assured me after a particularly frosty dinner at his parents' Bellevue mansion. "Once they see how happy you make me, how good we are together, they'll come around." He was partially right. His father eventually warmed to me, impressed by my business acumen if nothing else. Suzanne maintained a polite but distant relationship, thawing slightly only after Dean made it clear I wasn't going anywhere. When Dean proposed a year into our relationship, there was no elaborate production, just the two of us on a cliff overlooking the ocean at sunset, Dean expressing in heartfelt words why he wanted to build a life with me. "You make me better, Piper," he said, eyes shining. "You challenge me, support me, surprise me. I want 50, 60, 70 years of that. However many we can get." The ring was elegant, but not ostentatious. A solitaire diamond in a classic platinum setting. "I know you're not into flashy," he'd said as he slipped it onto my finger. "But I wanted something that would last forever. Like us. Like us. Forever." I'd believed him completely. Our wedding was small by Wallace family standards, but still larger than I would have preferred. 100 guests at a waterfront venue, strings of fairy lights reflecting off the bay, my best friends as bridesmaids, Dean's college roommates as groomsmen. I wore my mother's restored lace veil with a simple silk gown. Dean's eyes had filled with tears when he saw me walking down the aisle. "I promise to be your partner in all things," he vowed. "To support your dreams as fiercely as my own. To build a life of purpose and joy with you. To be honest, faithful, and true, all the days of my life." I'd repeated similar promises, meaning every word. The photographs from that day showed two people incandescent with love and certainty. We settled into married life with relative ease. We bought a starter home, a small 2-bedroom that we renovated on weekends. We established routines and traditions. Sunday morning coffee on the porch, summer hiking trips, Christmas Eve with my mother and stepfather, New Year's with Dean's family. My consulting business grew steadily. Dean climbed the ranks at his investment firm, eventually making partner. We moved to a larger home in a better neighborhood, the Craftsman we still lived in. We had discussions about children, but ultimately decided they weren't for us. We were fulfilled by our careers, our relationships, our plans for early retirement and world travel. Some people need kids to give their lives meaning, Dean said one night as we discussed it for what would be the final time. We've found meaning in other ways. There's no rule book that says what makes a complete life. I'd agreed. Our life felt complete as it was. We were the couple that others looked to with envy. Successful, supportive, solid. The friends you called when your own relationship was in trouble, because Dean and Piper Wallace had figured out the secret to lasting happiness. Or so it seemed. Looking back, I wondered when the cracks had begun to form. Had they always been there, hairline fractures I'd chosen not to see? Or had something fundamental changed? 7 years into our marriage, Dean's firm merged with a larger company. The transition was stressful. Longer hours, more travel, increased pressure to perform. I'd supported him through it, taking on more household responsibilities, being understanding about canceled plans and distracted conversations. It's temporary, he'd assured me. Once things settle, we'll get back to normal. But normal shifted. Dean's new position came with higher compensation, but also higher expectations. Weekend work became common. Business trips stretched from 2 days to 4. Social events with clients and colleagues, events I was increasingly excluded from, became mandatory. Still, we adjusted. We were partners, after all. We communicated. We compromised. We recommitted to our shared goals. Financial independence by 50, the cabin in the mountains, traveling the world together. When Dean suggested we increase our savings rate, cutting back on some of the smaller luxuries we'd allowed ourselves, I agreed. Our dream was worth temporary sacrifices. We were playing the long game. I traced the timeline in my mind, trying to pinpoint when partnership had become pretense. When had Dean's late nights truly become suspicious? When had his distraction turned to disinterest? When had his touch become perfunctory, his kisses brief and dutiful? Had it been sudden or gradual? Had there been warning signs I'd missed, conversations we should have had but didn't? The Dean I'd fallen in love with, the man who listened intently, who valued honesty above all, who treated our partnership as sacred, would never have betrayed me. Especially not when I was fighting for my life, which meant either I'd never truly known him, or he had changed into someone I no longer recognized. As I sat in our living room, surrounded by photographs documenting our 17 years together, both possibilities felt unbearable. Before cancer, before betrayal, before doubt crept into the corners of our marriage, Dean and I had built something beautiful together. Those golden years deserved to be remembered, not just for the contrast they provided to my current reality, but because they had been real. The happiness we'd shared had been genuine, at least for me. The early years of our marriage formed the foundation of my trust in Dean. We approached life as a team, each decision carefully weighed against our shared values and long-term goals. I remembered the night we decided to buy our forever home. We'd been married for 7 years, both of our careers flourishing. We'd outgrown our starter house, but had been hesitant to take on a larger mortgage. That night, we spread our finances across the dining table, spreadsheets, investment reports, projections. "If we do this," Dean said, tapping the listing for the Craftsman, "we delay the cabin fund by about 3 years." I nodded, understanding the trade-off. But we'd be putting down roots in a community we love, in a house we could grow old in. Dean reached across the table, taking my hand. "When you put it that way..." His smile was warm, conspiratorial. "Partners in crime?" "Partners in everything," I'd replied. That was how we operated, transparent, thoughtful, united. Every major decision involved both of us, even when one had more expertise in a particular area. Dean respected my business instincts. I valued his financial acumen. There was no power imbalance, no hidden agendas, just two people walking through life side by side. Our daily routines reflected this partnership. Mornings began with coffee on the porch when weather permitted, inside by the fireplace when it didn't. We'd discuss the day ahead, share interesting articles, debate ideas. These weren't superficial conversations. Dean engaged fully, challenging my thinking, offering perspectives I might have missed. "That's why I married you," I told him once after he'd helped me work through a difficult client situation. "You see angles I don't." "That's why we work," he'd replied, pressing a kiss to my temple. Different lenses, same view. Weekends had a comfortable rhythm. Saturday mornings at the farmer's market, selecting ingredients for the meals we'd cook. Together. Dean was the better cook, patient, precise, while I was the more experimental one. He taught me the importance of mise en place. I introduced him to flavor combinations he'd never considered. Sunday afternoons often found us working side by side in comfortable silence, Dean on investment research, me on client proposals. Occasionally, one of us would read something aloud, seeking the other's opinion. These quiet moments of shared concentration were as intimate as any other aspect of our relationship. We had inside jokes, secret language, small rituals that belonged only to us. The way Dean always held my coat for me to slip into, regardless of who else was present. The coffee he'd prepare exactly as I liked it. One sugar, splash of cream, appearing at my elbow when I was deep in work. The silly dance we'd do in the kitchen when good news arrived. Physical affection came naturally. Dean was never demonstrative in public, his reserved nature preventing grand gestures, but in private he was attentive, passionate. He knew my body as well as his own, could read my desires in the subtlest shifts of expression. Making love was sometimes playful, sometimes intense, but always connected. "I see you," he would whisper afterward, tracing patterns on my skin. 3 simple words that meant everything. Even our disagreements reflected mutual respect. We rarely raised our voices, focusing instead on understanding each other's perspective. Dean approached conflict methodically, laying out his thoughts in organized points. I was more emotionally expressive, but equally committed to resolution. We had boundaries. No walking away angry, no personal attacks, no bringing up past mistakes that had already been addressed. The goal isn't winning, Dean would remind me when discussions became heated. It's finding our way forward together. Together. That had been the operative word for so many years. Together, we celebrated promotions and client wins. Together, we mourned when Dean's father passed away after a sudden heart attack. Together, we renovated our home room by room, Dean handling structural changes while I focused on design elements. Together, we planned our finances, setting aside funds for retirement, travel, eventual healthcare needs. "Most couples fight about money," my friend Monica once remarked. "How do you and Dean make it look so easy?" The answer had seemed simple then. Complete transparency. We're building toward the same future, so why would we hide anything from each other? Why indeed? Our social life was active but selective. We maintained close relationships with a small circle of friends, couples we'd known since before marriage, colleagues who had become personal friends, neighbors who shared our interests. Dinner parties at our home were legendary among our group. Dean's, perfect steaks, my signature cocktails, conversation that flowed as easily as the wine. Each anniversary brought thoughtful gifts and new adventures. For our 5th, Dean surprised me with a hot air balloon ride at sunrise, followed by champagne breakfast. For our 10th, we renewed our vows in a private ceremony on the same cliff, where he'd proposed, followed by a 2-week trip to Italy. Our 15th, just 2 years ago, We celebrated by finalizing the purchase of the land where our retirement cabin would eventually stand. 5 wooded acres in the Cascade Mountains, with a small stream running through the property and views that stole your breath. We'd spent the weekend camping on our land, dreaming aloud about the cabin we would build. Dean had marked out where each room would be, describing the massive windows that would showcase the mountain view, the stone fireplace that would be the heart of the home, the wraparound porch where we'd watch the seasons change. 6 more years of working, he'd said as we toasted marshmallows over a campfire. Then we build, and the rest of our lives begins. What if we don't have 6 years? I'd asked, not prophetically but practically. What if something happens to one of us? Dean had pulled me closer, his arm secure around my shoulders. Then the other carries on the dream. But nothing's going to happen. We're going to grow disgustingly old together, sitting on that porch arguing about whose turn it is to make coffee. We'd laughed, secure in our future, certain of our path. The next morning, we'd hiked the property lines, claiming our territory, before reluctantly returning to the city and our busy lives. Even after 15 years, there were moments that caught me by surprise. Glancing across a crowded room to find Dean already watching me, his expression soft with affection. Or waking, in the night to find him still awake, just looking at me in the moonlight streaming through our bedroom window. "What?" I'd whisper. "Just memorizing you," he'd reply. "Still can't believe my luck." These weren't empty words or practiced lines. The Dean I knew, the Dean I loved, meant them. His actions consistently supported his words. He showed up. He leaned in. He prioritized our relationship above all else, until he didn't. The shift had been so subtle at first. A distracted nod instead of full attention. One canceled dinner plan, then another. The gradual disappearance of those small daily acts of consideration. Morning coffee conversations replaced by urgent emails requiring immediate response. Weekend. Projects together becoming solo activities as Dean's work increasingly bled into our personal time. I had attributed the changes to workplace pressure, to his expanding responsibilities, to the natural evolution of a long-term relationship. I had been understanding, patient, supportive. I had been a fool. As I sat in our living room, these memories washing over me, the contrast between then and now was stark. The Dean who had helped me through my first chemotherapy session, holding my hair back as I vomited, tears in his eyes, was the same man who was now draining our savings to buy diamond bracelets for someone named A. Monroe. The same hands that had once traced loving patterns on my skin now maintained careful distance, as if my illness might be contagious. The same mind that had once been focused intently on our shared future was now plotting exits and alibis. Had it all been a performance? Had I imagined the depth of his love, the authenticity of our connection? Or had something fundamental changed? Didn't yet have answers, but I knew where to look next. The first real indication that something had changed came 6 months before my diagnosis. I'd dismissed it at the time, filed it away as an anomaly rather than a warning sign. Now, looking back with clear eyes, I recognized it as the moment when our paths had begun to diverge. It was a Thursday evening in November. Rain lashed against the windows of our home, the wind howling through the trees in our backyard. I'd come home early from a client meeting, soaked and chilled, looking forward to a hot shower and the chicken pot pie I'd put in the slow cooker that morning. As I hung my dripping coat, I called out to Dean. His car was in the driveway, unexpected at 4:30 in the afternoon. Normally, he wouldn't be home until after 7 "Dean?" No answer. I kicked off my wet shoes and padded through the house, leaving damp footprints on the hardwood. The kitchen was empty, the living room quiet. Then I heard his voice, coming from his office, the door partially closed. He was on the phone, speaking in low, hushed tones. I wouldn't have thought anything of it. Dean often took work calls from home, except for the tone. Soft, intimate, a laugh I rarely heard anymore. "I can't talk about this now," he was saying as I approached. "Yes, I know. I'm handling it. Of course I miss—" He stopped abruptly as I pushed the door open. His expression shifted so quickly I almost missed it. From soft openness to startled guilt, then immediately to casual normalcy. "Hey," he said, covering the phone. "You're home early." "Flooding at the client's office," I explained, suddenly self-conscious about my wet hair and makeup-free face. "Who's that?" "Just work," he said, the words coming too quickly. "Peterson. Account. I need to finish this call." I nodded and backed out, closing the door behind me. As I headed upstairs to change, I heard him resume the conversation, his voice now all business, discussing market projections and investment strategies. Later that evening, as we ate dinner, I asked casually, "Everything okay with the Peterson account? You don't usually bring work home." Dean shrugged, focus on his food. "Just some complications with their portfolio allocation. Nothing major. I didn't realize you were handling that account personally now. I thought Timothy's team managed the Petersons." A barely perceptible pause. "We're restructuring some client assignments. I'll be taking on more of the high net worth individuals directly." "That's great," I said, meaning it. "More responsibility usually means more compensation." He nodded, relaxing slightly. "That's the plan. Speaking of work, how was your meeting before the flooding disaster?" And just like that, the conversation shifted. Dean asked all the right questions about my day, made sympathetic noises about the flooded office, offered suggestions for my client's project. The perfect attentive husband. But something had shifted. A small pebble had been dislodged, barely noticeable, but enough to create the first hairline crack in the foundation of my trust. I might have forgotten the incident entirely, if not for what happened 2 weeks later. Dean and I were attending a charity gala for his firm, a black tie affair at the Four Seasons. I'd bought a new dress for the occasion, a deep emerald silk that made my eyes look more green than hazel. Dean had whistled appreciatively when I emerged from our bedroom, twirling to show off the low back. "You look stunning," he'd said, adjusting his bow tie. For a moment, it felt like old times. His eyes warm with admiration, his hand at the small of my back possessive and proud. The event was typical of its kind. Elaborate floral arrangements, perfectly coordinated table settings, silent auction items displayed on the perimeter. We mingled during the cocktail hour, Dean introducing me to colleagues and clients with his arm around my waist. "My brilliant wife," he'd say. "The strategic consultant who keeps everyone's businesses running smoothly." I'd smile and engage, used to these professional social dances after years of practice. Dean excused himself to speak with a senior partner, leaving me chatting with the wife of one of his colleagues. That was when I first saw her. She was younger than me, early 30s, perhaps to my 44. Tall and willowy, with honey blonde hair falling in loose waves past her shoulders. She wore a red dress that clung to her curves, bold against the sea of traditional black and navy. But it wasn't her appearance that caught my attention. It was the way she moved through the room with absolute confidence, as if the space belonged to her. She approached Dean and his boss, greeting them with familiar ease. I watched as she placed her hand on Dean's arm, leaning in to say something that made both men laugh. There was nothing overtly inappropriate about the interaction, and yet— "That's Ashley Monroe," my companion said, following my gaze. "Arnold's new marketing director, quite the addition to the team, completely revamped their client acquisition strategy." "Oh?" I kept my voice neutral. "I don't think Dean's mentioned her. She's only been with the firm about 4 months, moved from Chicago. Apparently she was quite the catch, several firms trying to recruit her." I watched as Dean leaned down slightly to hear something Ashley was saying, his smile different somehow, more genuine, less the professional mask he typically wore at these events. The senior partner was called away, leaving them alone, and I saw Dean check his watch, say something to Ashley, and then they both glanced around the room before walking toward the terrace doors. "Excuse me," I said to my companion. "I need to find my husband." I made my way across the crowded ballroom, smiling and nodding at familiar faces. But by the time I reached the terrace doors, there was no sign of Dean or Ashley. The terrace itself was empty except for an elderly couple admiring the city lights. I returned to the ballroom, feeling slightly foolish. Dean appeared at my side moments later, coming from the direction of the men's room. "There you are," he said, resting his hand at the small of my back. "They are about to start seating for dinner." Throughout the meal, I found my gaze drawn repeatedly to Ashley Monroe, seated at a table across the room. She caught me looking once and smiled politely before turning her attention back to her dinner companion. Nothing in her manner suggested anything untoward. Yet the unease that had begun with that phone call settled more firmly into my consciousness. Dean was attentive throughout dinner, refilling my wine glass, asking if I was warm enough in the aggressively air-conditioned ballroom, his hand occasionally resting on my knee under the table. If anything, he seemed more demonstrative than usual in public, which should have reassured me. It didn't. On the drive home, I mentioned her casually. "I met Arnold's new marketing director tonight. Ashley, right? She seems very confident." Dean's hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel. "Ashley Monroe. Yes, she's been a great addition to the team. Brought in 3 major clients already. She seems quite friendly with everyone already." "That's her job," Dean said, a slight edge to his voice. "Building relationships is what marketing directors do." "Of course," I agreed. "I just meant she seems to have integrated well for being so new." Dean changed the subject, asking what I thought of the gala's silent auction items. I let him, filing away his reaction for future reference. Over the next few months, Ashley Monroe's name came up occasionally in Dean's work stories. Always professional, always in a group context. Nothing that would raise suspicions on its own. But combined with other small changes in Dean's behavior, a pattern was emerging that I could no longer ignore. The changes accelerated in the months that followed. Small shifts in Dean's behavior accumulated like snowflakes, insignificant individually, but together forming an unmistakable blanket of distance between us. His phone became an extension of his hand, the screen always angled away from me. He added a passcode. "Just security protocols for work," he explained when I raised an eyebrow. He began taking calls in the backyard or garage, his voice too low to overhear. Weekends, once sacred time for us, became fragmented by emergency client meetings and portfolio reviews that couldn't wait until Monday. When he was home, Dean was physically present but mentally elsewhere, his responses to my questions delayed and distracted. "Sorry, what was that?" he'd ask, looking up from his phone with vacant eyes. I found myself repeating conversations, reminding him of plans we'd made, experiencing the disorienting sensation of speaking to someone who looked like my husband but couldn't quite remember how to be him. Our intimate life withered. Dean's excuses were plausible. Stress, exhaustion, early meetings the next day. But the pattern was unmistakable. When we did connect physically, it felt mechanical, a box checked rather than a passion shared. He no longer looked into my eyes, no longer whispered my name. Afterward, he would roll away quickly, claiming he was too warm or needed to check something for work. I began keeping a mental inventory of these changes, questioning my own perceptions. Was I being paranoid? Overly sensitive? Was this simply what happened in long-term marriages? The slow cooling of passion? The gradual drift into parallel lives? Then came the night I woke at 2 a.m. to find Dean's side of the bed empty. Not unusual, He sometimes had trouble sleeping and would go downstairs to read or watch TV. But when I went to check on him, the downstairs was dark and silent. His car was gone from the garage. When he returned an hour later, I was waiting in the kitchen, a cold cup of tea in front of me. "Where were you?" I asked, my voice remarkably steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. Dean startled, clearly not, expecting to find me awake. "Jesus, Piper, you scared me." He set his keys on the counter, avoiding my eyes. "Couldn't sleep. Went for a drive to clear my head." At 3 in the morning? I had a lot on my mind. Work stuff. He ran a hand through his hair, which looked suspiciously neat for someone who had supposedly been tossing and turning. "Why are you up?" "I woke up and you were gone." I was worried. "Sorry." The word was empty, perfunctory. I should have left a note. Yes, you should have. I studied his face, searching for the man I'd married. "Dean, is everything okay? With us, I mean." Something flickered in his eyes. Guilt? Annoyance? It was gone too quickly to interpret. "Of course. Why wouldn't it be? You seem distant lately. Like you're physically here, but your mind is somewhere else. Or with someone else." He stiffened almost imperceptibly. "That's ridiculous. I've just been under a lot of pressure at work. The Richardson merger is taking up all my mental bandwidth." He moved toward me, placing a perfunctory kiss on my forehead. "Let's go back to bed. We both need sleep." I let him lead me upstairs, but sleep eluded me. I lay beside him, listening to his breathing, wondering if he was really asleep or just pretending, as I was. The next morning, I checked his odometer while he was in the shower. He'd driven 27 miles during his late-night head-clearing excursion. Our house was 11 miles from his office. The math wasn't difficult. I began paying closer attention to our finances. Dean had always managed our investments. My interest was minimal as long as we were meeting our goals. But I handled the day-to-day bill paying and expense tracking. Nothing seemed obviously amiss at first. Our mortgage was paid on time, utilities current, credit card balances reasonable. But then I noticed the increase in cash withdrawals from Dean's personal account. $500 here, $700 there. When I mentioned it casually over breakfast, he had a ready explanation. "I'm keeping more cash on hand for client meetings. Lots of coffee and lunch discussions lately. Easier than submitting expense reports for every little thing." It sounded plausible. Still, I began taking screenshots of our account balances weekly, tracking the pattern of withdrawals against Dean's supposed work schedule. The business trips increased in frequency. Chicago, Boston, San Francisco, always with legitimate business. Reasons: always with conference schedules he forwarded to my email. Always with colleagues I knew by name. Yet he returned from these trips with fewer souvenirs for me, fewer stories, a growing reluctance to share photos or details. "It was just meetings in hotel conference rooms," he'd say with a shrug. "Nothing worth talking about." I found myself checking his luggage when he was in the shower, looking for what? I wasn't even sure. Receipts? Unfamiliar cologne? Evidence of a life being lived parallel to ours? I found nothing concrete, just the vague sense that items were too neatly packed, shirts too freshly pressed, as if he'd done laundry before returning home. About 3 months before my diagnosis, I received a call from Monica, a mutual friend who worked at a boutique investment firm across town. "Hey, stranger," she said when I answered. "Long time no see." "Too long," I agreed. "How's life?" We chatted for a few minutes, catching up on work and mutual acquaintances, before she mentioned the real reason for her call. "So, I saw Dean yesterday, and meant to say hello, but they were already leaving when I spotted them." My pulse quickened slightly. "Them?" "Dean and his colleague. Blonde woman, very stylish. They were having lunch at Maison Marcel. Looked like an intense conversation. Probably work stuff, so I didn't interrupt. Maison Marcel, an intimate French bistro downtown, known for its romantic atmosphere and expensive wine list. Not the kind of place you'd typically take a colleague for a casual business lunch. That was probably Ashley Monroe, I said, keeping my voice neutral. She's their marketing director. Ah, that makes sense. Well, next time remind Dean that he owes us dinner at your place. It's been ages since we've had one of your famous dinner parties. After we hung up, I sat with the information, turning it over in my mind. There was nothing inherently suspicious about a business lunch, even at an upscale restaurant. Dean met with colleagues all the time. But he hadn't mentioned this lunch. When I'd texted him that day asking about his plans, he'd replied simply, "Meetings all day. We'll grab something at the desk." That night, I asked casually, "How was lunch? Anything good at the cafeteria?" Dean didn't look up from his laptop. "Hmm? Oh, just a sandwich." You know how it is. The lie settled between us, small but significant. I could have confronted him, mentioned Monica's call, watched him scramble for an explanation. But some instinct held me back. Once I showed my and revealed that I was watching and aware, something would change. The game would shift. I wasn't ready for that yet. Instead, I began researching Ashley Monroe. LinkedIn provided the professional basics: MBA from Northwestern, previous positions at financial firms in Chicago and New York, impressive recommendations, Facebook and Instagram accounts set to private. I considered sending a friend request, but decided against it. Too obvious. I searched for her name alongside Dean's in company newsletters and press releases, finding a few mentions of them working together on specific accounts. Nothing unusual. A photo from a company charity event showed them standing in a group, not particularly close to each other, both smiling professionally at the camera. There was nothing concrete, nothing I could point to and say, "This is proof." Just an accumulation of small inconsistencies, subtle changes, gut feelings I couldn't quite dismiss. Then came the business trip to Aspen. 3 days in February, supposedly for a conference on wealth management strategies for high-net-worth clients. Dean showed me the agenda, the flight confirmation, the hotel reservation. "I wish you could come," he said, and for a moment sounded like the old Dean. "We could extend the trip, get some skiing in." "You hate skiing," I reminded him. "You broke your wrist the last time we tried, remember?" He laughed, and I saw a flicker of discomfort in his eyes. "Right. Well, maybe just enjoy the mountain views then." "Next time," I said. "I've got that big project for the tech startup, remember? The timeline's too tight for me to get away." "Right," he echoed. "Next time." While he was gone, I immersed myself in work, trying to ignore the hollow feeling in our home, the absence that felt more significant than it should have for a routine business trip. I checked his location occasionally through our shared family account. The blue dot remained in Aspen, moving between the hotel and conference center as expected. The day before he was due to return, I received a call from my doctor's office. They had an opening for the follow-up to discuss my mammogram results. Could I come in tomorrow morning? I agreed, making a mental note to tell Dean when he called that evening. But he didn't call. A text came instead. "Long day of sessions. Heading to dinner with the team. Talk tomorrow." The next morning, I sat in the sterile examination room alone, as the doctor explained that they'd found concerning calcifications, that a biopsy was needed, that we shouldn't panic, but should prepare for the possibility of unwelcome news. I nodded, asked appropriate questions, scheduled the biopsy. Then I sat in my car in the hospital parking garage and called Dean. No answer. I sent a text. "Need to talk when you get home. Important." His reply came an hour later. "Landing at 2. We'll be home by 4. I waited, the weight of potential bad news, and growing suspicion creating a pressure in my chest that made it difficult to breathe. At 4:30, I heard his key in the lock. He entered carrying his suitcase and a small gift bag. "Sorry I'm late," he said, setting down his things. "The Uber got stuck in traffic." He handed me the gift bag. "Brought you something." Inside was a small box of gourmet chocolates with the name of an Aspen confectioner on the lid. A safe, impersonal gift that could have been purchased in the airport. I set it aside. "We need to talk," I said. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Dean set his carry-on by the stairs, his expression shifting from distracted to concerned. "What's wrong? Did something happen with your client?" "I went to the doctor this morning," I said, watching his face carefully. "They found something on my mammogram. I need a biopsy." Dean's face paled. He crossed the room in 3 quick strides, sitting beside me on the couch. "A biopsy? Piper, why didn't you call me right away?" "I did," I replied simply. "You didn't. Answer." He looked away briefly, pulling out his phone. "I had it on silent during the flight. I see your call now." He reached for my hand. "What did the doctor say exactly?" I repeated what I'd been told: suspicious calcifications, need for further testing, the statistical likelihood of various outcomes. As I spoke, Dean's expression grew increasingly troubled. He squeezed my hand, asked appropriate questions, promised we would face this together. For a moment, he seemed entirely present, entirely mine, the man I had married, the partner I had trusted with my life. "When is the biopsy scheduled?" he asked. "Next Thursday." "I'll be there," he said firmly. "I'll clear my schedule completely." I nodded, wanting to believe him. How was Aspen? The transition was abrupt, and I saw him recalibrate. Productive. Good sessions on portfolio diversification in volatile markets. He attempted a smile. "Nothing you'd find interesting." "Did the whole team go?" I asked casually. Dean stood, moving toward the kitchen. "Most of the senior staff. Do you want some tea? You look cold." "Was Ashley there?" He paused, one hand on the kettle. "Ashley? Yes, of course. She organized the client dinner." His tone was carefully neutral. "Why do you ask?" I shrugged. "Just curious. You've mentioned her involvement in these conferences before." Dean busied himself with the tea, his back to me. "She's good at her job, creates the right atmosphere for client engagement." I'm sure she does, I thought, but said nothing more on the subject. Instead, I steered the conversation back to my medical situation, watching as Dean slipped back into the role of concerned husband. He was good at it, attentive, reassuring, appropriately worried without being overwhelming. If I hadn't been looking for the performance, I might have missed it entirely. That night, as Dean showered, I checked his suitcase. The clothes were neatly packed, as always, but something caught my eye. A receipt tucked into an inner pocket. I slipped it out quietly. The Four Seasons Aspen. A room service bill for 2, champagne, strawberries, 2 breakfast orders. Dean's name, his corporate card number. I took a photo with my phone, then returned the receipt exactly as I'd found it. My hands were steady, my breathing controlled. I felt strangely calm, as if I were observing someone else's marriage disintegrating, someone else's husband betraying her on the eve of a potential cancer diagnosis. The shower stopped. I moved to the bed, my phone hidden beneath my pillow, and picked up a book I had no intention of reading. Dean emerged in a cloud of steam, a towel wrapped around his waist, another rubbing through his damp hair. "Water pressure's still not right," he commented, as if we were having a normal evening, as if my world wasn't collapsing around me. "I'll call the plumber tomorrow," I replied automatically. Dean dropped his towels, dressed in his usual sleep pants, and slid into bed beside me. After a moment's hesitation, he leaned over and kissed my cheek. "Try not to worry too much about the biopsy. We'll get through this." We. As if we were still a team. As if he hadn't been sharing champagne and strawberries with another woman while I scheduled a test to determine if I had cancer. Good night, Dean, I said, turning off my bedside lamp. In the darkness, I listened to his breathing, waiting for it to deepen into sleep. When I was certain he wouldn't wake, I slipped from the bed and padded silently to his office. The desktop computer was password protected, but I knew the code: Dean's father's birthday followed by his mother's, a combination he'd used for years. Inside, I found what I was looking for in his email: a folder labeled AM Projects that contained nothing related to actual work. Instead, I found months of correspondence between Dean and Ashley. Professional at first, then gradually more personal. Inside jokes, late-night messages, plans for meetings that never appeared on his official calendar, references to our special place and next time. No explicit declarations of love, nothing so obvious, but the growing intimacy was unmistakable. And then I found the photos. Not sexual, but personal. Ashley sitting on a hotel balcony wrapped in what appeared to be a man's dress shirt, mountains, visible in the background. Ashley smiling over a glass of wine in a restaurant I didn't recognize. Ashley sleeping, her blonde hair spread across a pillow, her bare shoulder just visible at the edge of the frame. The last email was dated yesterday. Missing you already. Back to reality tomorrow. A. I closed the folder, erased my browsing history, and shut down the computer. Back in our bedroom, Dean slept peacefully, one arm flung across what should have been my side of the bed. I stood watching him, this stranger I had loved for 17 years, and felt something crumble inside me. The last tendrils of doubt, perhaps. Or maybe it was hope. Hope that I had been wrong, hope that there was an explanation, hope that my marriage wasn't ending just as my health was being threatened. I retrieved my phone and the evidence I'd collected, then moved to the guest bedroom. Sleep was impossible, but I wouldn't spend another night beside a liar. In the morning, Dean found me in the kitchen, already dressed, a cup of coffee cooling in front of me. He hesitated in the doorway, clearly, noting my reddened eyes, my resolve. You weren't in bed, he said, a question in his tone. No, I agreed. I wasn't. Piper, if you're worried about the biopsy, I know about Ashley. I cut him off, my voice hollow. I know about Aspen. I know about the room service for 2, the photos, the emails, all of it. Dean froze, his face draining of color. For a long moment, he said nothing, and in his silence, I heard everything. It's not what you're thinking, he finally managed, the words weak even to his own ears. Isn't it? I pushed the room service receipt across the counter toward him. Champagne and strawberries, Dean? While I was here scheduling a biopsy? He swallowed hard, his hands gripping the edge of the counter. Piper, please. Let me explain. I think you've done enough explaining. I stood, no longer able to bear the sight of him. I have cancer. The doctor called last night after you were asleep. The radiologist reviewed my images again and is confident enough to say it without waiting for the biopsy. Stage 3 breast cancer. Dean's face crumpled. Oh God, Piper. I held up a hand, stopping him. I need to focus on getting well. I can't fight cancer and your betrayal at the same time. Please, he whispered, reaching for me. We can work through this. I'll end it, I swear. It was a mistake. A stupid, terrible mistake. I stepped back from his touch. Which part was the mistake, Dean? Starting the affair or continuing it after you knew I might be sick? Or maybe the mistake was spending our retirement savings on your girlfriend while telling me we needed to cut back on expenses because of potential medical bills? His eyes widened in shock. What are you talking about? Don't, I said sharply. Don't insult me by lying anymore. I've seen the transfers to her account. A. Monroe. I've seen the Tiffany receipt for the bracelet you bought her. I know what you've done with our money, our future. Dean sank onto a kitchen stool, his defenses crumbling. I was going to replace it, he said weakly. It was temporary. A bitter laugh escaped me. Just like your marriage vows? His head snapped up, eyes pleading. Piper, I still love you. This thing with Ashley, it's not serious, it's just, how much have you given her, Dean? How much of our savings is gone? He looked away, unable to meet my gaze. I don't know exactly. I do, I said coldly. $75,000. So far. That we were supposed to be saving for medical emergencies, like cancer. Dean buried his face in his hands. I'll get it back. I'll work extra, take on more clients. We'll still have the retirement we planned, I promise. There is no we anymore, I said, my voice breaking for the first time. You made sure of that. The days following my confrontation with Dean took on a surreal quality. We moved through our home like ghosts, careful not to occupy the same space, speaking only when absolutely necessary. Dean slept in the guest room without being asked. I locked the bedroom door anyway. My diagnosis was confirmed officially by the biopsy Dean had promised to attend but didn't. He sent a text an hour before claiming an unavoidable client emergency. I sat alone as the doctor explained treatment options, prognosis statistics, and next steps. I took notes in the leather-bound journal Dean had given me for our anniversary 3 years ago, my handwriting precise and steady despite the storm raging inside me. Stage 3 invasive ductal carcinoma. Aggressive but treatable. Surgery recommended, followed by chemotherapy and radiation. I listened and nodded, asked questions about survival rates and side effects, scheduled appointments with specialists. I was surprisingly calm, as if the betrayal of my husband had numbed me to all other catastrophes. In the parking lot afterward, I called Jenna, my oldest friend. I need a lawyer, I said without preamble. Someone who specializes in high-asset divorces. There was a brief silence. Piper, what's happened? Dean's having an affair. He's spent $75,000 of our savings on his mistress. And I have cancer. Another silence, longer this time. I'll be at your house in an hour. True to her word, Jenna arrived with takeout food I couldn't eat, a bottle of wine I couldn't drink due to my new medications, and the name of the best divorce attorney in Seattle. Calvin Friedman, she said, writing down the contact information. He's ruthless but fair, and he knows the financial industry inside out. His ex-wife was actually Mark's college roommate, which is how I know him. I clutched the paper like a lifeline. I need to be smart about this, Jenna. I can't afford to make emotional decisions. She studied me carefully. Are you sure about divorce? Sometimes people make mistakes, especially when facing mortality. He was seeing her before. My diagnosis. I cut in. And he continued after he knew I was sick. He spent our savings, money we set aside for emergencies for our future, on hotel rooms and jewelry for her while I was scheduling cancer treatments. My voice remained eerily calm. This isn't a mistake. It's who he is now. Jenna reached, across the table, squeezing my hand. Then we'll make sure you get everything you deserve. I met with Calvin Friedman the following day. His office occupied the top floor of a downtown high-rise, with views of Elliott Bay that would have been breathtaking under different circumstances. The man himself was in his early 60s, impeccably dressed, with sharp eyes that missed nothing, and a demeanor that balanced professional detachment with genuine concern. Mrs. Wallace, he said, gesturing to a chair across from his imposing desk. I understand you're facing a difficult situation on multiple fronts. I nodded, handing him a folder containing the evidence I'd gathered so far. Bank statements showing the transfers, credit card receipts, screenshots of emails I'd found. Before we begin, I said, I need to be clear about my priorities. I have stage 3 breast cancer. My prognosis is good with aggressive treatment, but I need financial security, now more than ever. I can't afford a lengthy, contentious divorce that drains our assets further. Calvin examined the documents carefully before responding. I understand. Given what I'm seeing here, we have significant leverage. Mr. Wallace has breached his fiduciary duty to your marriage by diverting substantial marital assets for personal use, specifically, his extramarital affair. What does that mean practically? It means we can pursue a divorce settlement that compensates you not just for your fair share of marital assets, but potentially additional amounts due to his financial misconduct. He leaned forward. Mrs. Wallace, do you have access to all of your financial records, investment accounts, retirement plans, property deeds? I hesitated. Some. Dean managed most of our investments. Then that's our first order of business. Before confronting your husband, legally, we need a complete picture of your financial situation. He slid a detailed checklist across the desk. I need everything on this list. Account statements, property valuations, tax returns for the past 5 years, life insurance policies, everything. I studied the extensive list, feeling overwhelmed. Some of this information is in Dean's office or on his computer. Get what you can legally access. For the rest, we'll use discovery processes once proceedings begin. Calvin's expression softened slightly. Mrs. Wallace, I understand you're dealing with a health crisis on top of marital betrayal. My job is to handle the legal and financial aspects so you can focus on your treatment and recovery. I nodded gratefully. How do I prevent Dean from moving more money while we're preparing? We'll file for temporary orders freezing major assets once we initiate proceedings. Until then, he hesitated. Do you have access to any accounts solely in your name? My business account, I confirmed, and a small inheritance from my grandmother in a separate account. Good. I recommend transferring enough funds to cover your anticipated medical expenses and living costs for at least 6 months, not from joint accounts. That could be problematic, but ensure your personal accounts are secure and accessible only to you. I left Calvin's office with a clear plan and a renewed sense of purpose. This was no longer just about Dean's betrayal. It was about securing my future during the most uncertain period of my life. That evening, while Dean worked late, or so he claimed, I began the painstaking process of documenting our financial life. In the home office, I photographed relevant documents, downloaded statements from accounts I had access to, created spreadsheets tracking our major assets. I was methodical, careful to leave everything exactly as I'd found it. The next day, I opened a new checking account at a different bank from the one we'd always used, transferring funds from my business account to cover immediate needs. I changed passwords on my personal email and cloud storage accounts. I removed my personal and business documents from our shared filing cabinets, storing them instead in a lockbox in Jenna's garage. Through it all, I maintained a facade of normalcy with Dean. We existed in a strange limbo, neither acknowledging nor resolving the revelation of his affair. He continued to work long hours, coming home after I'd gone to bed, leaving before I woke. The few times we did interact, he made awkward attempts at caretaking, offering to pick up prescriptions, asking about doctor appointments, preparing meals I couldn't stomach due to medication side effects. I'm still here for you, he said one evening as I sat at the kitchen table reviewing medical insurance paperwork. Despite everything, I want to support you through this. I looked up at him, this man I'd once trusted with my heart, my body, my future. I'd prefer to handle it myself, I said evenly. A week after my confrontation with Dean, I received an unexpected text from an unknown number. This is Ashley Monroe. We need to talk. My heart raced as I stared at the message. How had she gotten my number? What could she possibly have to say to me? I showed the text to Jenna, who was helping me prepare for my first chemotherapy session. Don't respond, she advised immediately. Nothing good can come from engaging with her. I nodded, setting my phone aside, but the message nagged at me. What did Ashley want? To apologize? To justify? To ask me to let Dean go? The possibilities circled in my mind, distracting me from the more important matters at hand. 2 days later, as I was leaving a pre-chemo appointment, I saw her. Ashley Monroe was leaning against my car in the hospital parking garage, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. She was even more striking up close, tall and elegant in an expensive-looking trench coat, her blonde hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail. I approached slowly, keys clutched in my hand, suddenly conscious of my own appearance, the weight I'd already lost, the pallor of my skin, the woolen cap covering my thinning hair. "Mrs. Wallace," she said, straightening as I neared. "Thank you for meeting me." "This isn't a meeting," I replied coolly. "You're waiting at my car without invitation. Some might call that stalking." She had the grace to look uncomfortable. "I apologize for the intrusion. You didn't respond to my text and I needed to speak with you." "About what? Your affair with my husband? The money he's been giving you from our savings? The future you're planning together while I fight cancer?" My voice remained steady, betraying none of the turmoil beneath. Ashley's expression shifted, confusion clouding her features. "Money? What money?" I laughed bitterly. "Please don't insult my intelligence. The transfers to your account, A. Monroe. The gifts, the hotels, the diamond bracelet from Tiffany's." She shook her head slowly. "Mrs. Wallace, Dean hasn't given me any money. Yes, we've been involved romantically, and I won't pretend otherwise. But I have my own money. I've never taken a cent from him." I studied her face, looking for signs of deception, but finding only what appeared to be genuine bewilderment. A cold feeling settled in the pit of my stomach. "If Dean hasn't been transferring money to you," I said carefully, "then who is A. Monroe?" Ashley's brow furrowed. "I have no idea. It's not me." She hesitated, then added, "My middle name is Elizabeth. Ashley Elizabeth Monroe. If Dean was making transfers to me, they'd be to A.E. Monroe, not just A. Monroe." I leaned against my car, suddenly dizzy. The foundation of my understanding, as painful as it had been, was crumbling. If Ashley wasn't receiving Dean's transfers, where had that $75,000 gone? "Why are you here?" I asked finally. "What do you want?" Ashley wrapped her coat tighter around herself, a defensive gesture at odds with her confident demeanor. "Dean ended things between us when you were diagnosed. He said he needed to focus on supporting you." I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "Is that what he told you?" "Dean didn't end anything. He was with you in Aspen while I was scheduling my biopsy. Room service for two, champagne and strawberries. Remember that?" Her expression faltered. "That was before. I thought he told you after that trip. He said he couldn't see me anymore. That you needed him. Dean hasn't been home before midnight in weeks. If he's not with you, where is he?" The question hung in the air between us unanswered. Ashley looked genuinely shaken. "I assumed he was with you at doctor's appointments, treatment consultations." "He's missed every appointment," I said flatly. "Every single one." We stared at each other, two women trying to reconcile conflicting versions of the same man. Despite everything, I felt a bizarre moment of connection with her. We had both been deceived, though in very different ways. "I'm sorry," Ashley said finally, "for the affair, for approaching you like this. I just needed to know if he was telling the truth about ending things to be with you. I guess I have my answer." As she turned to leave, I called after her. "Wait, this A. Monroe, do you know anyone with that name? A sibling? A cousin?" She paused, thinking. "No one close. My father had a sister named Anna Monroe, but she died years ago." She studied my face. "Why? How much money are we talking about?" $75,000. So far. Ashley's eyes widened. "And you thought it was going to me? Mrs. Wallace?" "Piper," I corrected automatically. "Piper. I don't know where that money is going, but it's not to me. I have my own career, my own income. I don't need Dean's money." Just his attention, I couldn't help but add. She had the grace to look ashamed. I don't expect you to believe me, but I didn't know how serious your health situation was. Dean told me you were having some tests, but that it was probably nothing. When I found out you had cancer, she shook her head. That's when I ended it. You ended it? This revelation hit like a physical blow. Dean had lied about that too, 3 weeks ago. He didn't tell you? Ashley looked genuinely surprised. He begged me to reconsider, said he'd leave you after you recovered, that he just needed time. My mind reeled with this new information. Dean, begging another woman to continue their affair while promising to leave me once I recovered from cancer. The depth of his betrayal expanded like a dark hole, bottomless and consuming. I need to go, I said, my voice suddenly distant in my own ears. Please don't contact me again. Ashley nodded and walked away, her heels clicking against the concrete of the parking garage, the sound echoing like the final notes of a finished symphony. I sat in my car for a long time, unable to drive, trying to process this new reality. Dean had been lying to everyone, to me, to Ashley, perhaps even to himself. And the money, that significant slice of our savings, had disappeared to someone or something I knew nothing about. By the time I arrived home, a new determination had taken hold. I needed answers, and I needed a plan, not just for uncovering the truth, but for protecting myself in its aftermath. I called Calvin Friedman from my car. I need a forensic accountant, I said when he answered. The situation is more complicated than I thought. Explain, he said simply. I outlined my conversation with Ashley, the revelation that she wasn't receiving Dean's money, and my growing concern about where our savings had actually gone. This changes our approach, Calvin agreed. I'll bring in Melanie Chen. She's the best forensic accountant I know, specializes in hidden assets and financial infidelity. But Piper, this will take time. If Dean is hiding money beyond an affair, we may be looking at more complex issues. Gambling, investments gone bad, possibly even illegal activities. The possibilities made my stomach clench. How soon can she start? I'll call her today. In the meantime, continue gathering what information you can, but be careful. If Dean realizes you're investigating, he might move assets further out of reach. I ended the call with a promise to remain vigilant and discreet. Inside the house, I moved through my evening routine mechanically, checking mail, preparing a simple dinner I had no appetite for, organizing the medications that now ruled my days. An hour later, my phone rang. Calvin again. Melanie can meet. Tomorrow at my office, 2 p.m. Can you make it? I'll be there. The meeting with Melanie Chen proved illuminating. Small and precise, with short black hair and rectangular glasses, she exuded competence and focus. She reviewed the financial documents I'd gathered, asking pointed questions about Dean's business activities, our banking habits, and any recent changes in financial patterns. Based on what you've provided, I can see 3 transfers to A. Monroe. In the past 6 months, each routed through your husband's personal account, she observed. But there are other withdrawals and transfers that don't follow your normal patterns. Without access to all accounts, I can only see part of the picture. What do you think is happening? I asked. Melanie's expression remained carefully neutral. I've seen cases where people create fictional recipients to disguise the true nature of financial transactions. A. Monroe could be a shell company, an investment vehicle, or even a completely fabricated entity. Without more information, it's difficult to say. How do we get that information? Once you file for divorce, we can subpoena financial records as part of discovery, Calvin explained. But that alerts your husband that you're taking legal action. What's your recommendation? I looked between them. Melanie tapped her pen against her notepad. Before filing, I'd like to build a more complete financial profile. Can you access your joint tax returns for the past 5 years? Any investment account statements? Safe deposit box records? I nodded slowly. Some. Dean keeps copies in his home office. Get what you can without raising suspicion, she advised. And there's one more thing to consider. Your health costs. Going forward. Cancer treatment is expensive, even with good insurance. You need to secure your financial position before medical bills potentially complicate matters. This practical reminder brought me back to the harsh reality of my situation. Beyond the betrayal and deception, I was fighting for my literal survival. I needed resources not just for a divorce, but for the battle against the disease trying to kill me. The three of us developed a strategy. I would gather additional financial information while maintaining the strained status quo with Dean. Melanie would analyze what I could provide, building a preliminary financial picture. Calvin would prepare divorce filings but hold them until we had a clearer understanding of our financial position. What about my cancer treatments? I asked. The first chemotherapy session is scheduled for next week. I can't delay medical care while we sort out this mess. Use your health insurance as usual, Calvin advised. Document all medical expenses meticulously. If Dean is the primary policyholder, we'll address continuous coverage in the divorce agreement. Left their office with a detailed task list and a strange sense of relief. The uncertainty remained, but now I had direction, professional support, and a plan forming, not just for uncovering Dean's deception, but for securing my future regardless of what that deception entailed. That evening, I sat in our bedroom reviewing the notes I'd made, creating a checklist of documents to locate and photograph. My thoughts kept returning to that name, A. Monroe. Who or what was it? And why was Dean channeling our savings there? My first chemotherapy session loomed just days away. I'd made arrangements for Jenna to drive me, Dean had offered, but I'd refused, unable to stomach the thought of depending on him for something so vital. The timing felt almost surreal, as my body prepared to be flooded with drugs designed to kill the cancer cells threatening my life. My mind was equally consumed with neutralizing the threat Dean's actions posed to my future. When I heard his key in the lock that night, something had shifted inside me. The shock and pain of discovery had crystallized into cold, clear purpose. I wasn't just fighting cancer. I was fighting for justice, for security, for the life I deserved after Dean's betrayal, and I intended to win both battles. The morning of EE, my first chemotherapy session dawned cool and misty, typical Seattle weather that matched my state of mind. I'd barely slept, my thoughts cycling between anxiety about the treatment and determination to continue my financial investigation. Dean had left for work early, or so he claimed, after an awkward exchange in the kitchen. I can still take you. Today, he'd offered, hovering near the coffee maker. You shouldn't have to rely on Jenna. Jenna doesn't mind, I'd replied, not meeting his eyes. Piper. His voice had softened, taking on the tone he used when trying to win an argument through emotion rather than logic. I know things are complicated between us right now, but I meant what I said. I want to support you through this. I'd finally looked at him then, studying the man I'd once believed would never hurt me. He looked tired, the lines around his eyes deeper than I remembered, a certain haunted quality to his expression. For a brief moment, I almost felt sorry for him. If you want to support me, I said carefully, you could tell me about A. Monroe. His expression shifted instantly, the vulnerability replaced by wariness. What? A. Monroe, I repeated. The account you've been transferring our savings to for the past 6 months. Who is it, Dean? He set down his coffee cup with deliberate care. It's a business investment. I told you we were diversifying our portfolio. An investment that required $75,000 from our emergency fund, without any documentation, without any discussion with me? Dean's jaw tightened. It's complicated. There's paperwork at the office. I can bring it home tonight, show you the projections. Another lie. I could see it in the way he couldn't quite meet my eyes. in the slight twitch at the corner of his mouth. I'd been married to this man for 17 years. I knew his tells. "Don't bother," I said, turning away. "I have more important things to worry about today." He'd left shortly after, promising to check in later. I'd nodded without responding, focusing instead on preparing for the day ahead. My hospital bag was packed with items from the chemo preparation checklist: comfortable clothes, a tablet loaded with books and movies, lotion for dry skin, ginger candies for nausea. Jenna arrived at 9, cheerful but not overbearingly so, helping me to the car with quiet efficiency. "How are you feeling?" she asked as we pulled away from the house. "Oddly calm," I admitted. "Like I'm watching someone else's life." She nodded, understanding. "Dissociation is a normal response to trauma, and you're dealing with two massive traumas." Simultaneously, I turned to look at her, grateful for her steady presence. Jenna had been my friend since college, had stood beside me at my wedding, had celebrated every professional triumph, and comforted me through every setback. Now she was driving me to chemotherapy while I plotted the dismantling of my marriage. "Did you ever suspect?" I asked suddenly. "About Dean?" Jenna kept her eyes on the road, her hands steady on the wheel. "No," she said, after a long pause. "I believed in your marriage as much as you did. Dean always seemed devoted." "He was a good actor," I said bitterly. "Or he changed," Jenna suggested. "People do, sometimes. Not that it excuses anything," she added quickly. We fell silent as we approached the hospital, each lost in our own thoughts. The oncology center was designed to be soothing: soft colors, comfortable chairs, art on the walls, but nothing could disguise its purpose. This was a place where people fought for their lives, where toxic chemicals were administered in the hope that they would kill the disease before they killed the patient. The nurse who greeted me was kind and professional, explaining each step of the process as she inserted the IV line, checked my vitals, prepared the cocktail of drugs that would begin my body's war against the cancer cells. Jenna sat beside me, offering silent support, occasionally squeezing my hand when a particularly uncomfortable sensation washed through me. 3 hours into the treatment, my phone buzzed with a text from Dean. "Thinking of you. Let me know if you need anything." I showed it to Jenna, who rolled her eyes. "Bare minimum effort," she muttered. "He's never been good at illness," I said, surprising myself by defending him. "When I had the flu 2 years ago, he stayed in the guest room to avoid getting sick." "That's different," Jenna pointed out. "This is cancer, not a cold." I nodded, too tired to argue. The drugs were already making me feel strange. Not exactly nauseous yet, but disconnected, as if my body were floating slightly above the recliner. When we finally returned home, the house was empty. A note sat on the kitchen counter in Dean's precise handwriting. "Meeting ran late. Dinner in the fridge. Call if you need me. D." Jenna read it over my shoulder and snorted. "Unbelievable. Your first chemo day and he can't even be bothered to come home early?" I said nothing, heading upstairs, to change into comfortable pajamas. The exhaustion was bone deep, unlike any tiredness I'd experienced before. Jenna helped me settle into bed, arranging pillows, placing water and anti-nausea medication within easy reach. "I can stay," she offered. "The guest room is made up." I shook my head. "I'll be fine. I'm just going to sleep. Call me if anything changes. Anything at all." After she left, I lay in the silence of our bedroom, listening to the familiar creaks and sighs of the house. This room had been our sanctuary, the place where we had shared dreams and intimacies, plans and promises. Now it felt like a museum of a dead relationship, preserved but no longer living. I must have dozed off because I startled awake at the sound of the front door opening. Dean's footsteps on the stairs, his careful movements in the hallway, a gentle knock at the bedroom door. "Piper? Are you awake?" I considered pretending to be asleep but decided against it. Yes, He opened the door slowly, his silhouette backlit by the hallway light. How was it? Exhausting, I said truthfully. But straightforward. The nurses were kind. Dean entered, perching awkwardly on the edge of the bed. Any side effects yet? Fatigue. The nausea usually hits on day 2 or 3. He nodded, clearly uncomfortable. This close, I could smell his cologne, the expensive one I'd given him last Christmas. The one that had been disappearing too quickly because he was wearing it for another woman. I brought you something, he said, placing a small gift bag on the nightstand. It's a journal. The nurse navigator recommended keeping track of symptoms, medications, questions for doctors. I thought it might help. The gesture was thoughtful, precisely the kind of practical support Dean had always been good at providing. For a moment, I glimpsed the man I had married. Attentive, considerate, partnership-oriented. Thank you, I said, meaning it despite everything. Dean hesitated, then reached out as if to touch my hand, stopping just short. Piper, I know you don't want to hear this right now, but I am sorry. For all of it. I studied his face in the dim light. He did look sorry, though whether he was sorry for the betrayal or sorry he'd been caught remained unclear. I met Ashley, I said quietly. His entire body tensed, eyes widening in alarm. What? When? After my pre-chemo appointment, she was waiting at my car. Jesus, Piper, He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of distress I'd seen countless times over our years together. What did she say? That you ended things when I was diagnosed. Then, when I confronted her with evidence that you hadn't, she claimed she ended it 3 weeks ago. I kept my voice even, watching his reactions. She also said she's never received money from you, that the transfers to A. Monroe have nothing to do with her. Dean's face paled visibly even in the dimly lit room. She had no right to approach you. Not now. Not with everything you're dealing with. That's what you're concerned about? Her timing? I laughed softly, the sound hollow. Not the fact that you've been lying to both of us? Not the fact that I still don't know where $75,000 of our savings has gone. He stood abruptly, moving to the window, his back to me. It's complicated, Piper. So you keep saying. Uncomplicate it for me, Dean. For a long moment, he said nothing, his shoulders rigid with tension. When he finally turned back, his expression was carefully composed. It was an investment opportunity that came through a private channel. High risk, but potentially high reward. I didn't want to worry you with the details, especially after your diagnosis. Another lie. Smoother than the last, but still a lie. I could almost admire his commitment to the deception. I see, I said simply. Well, thank you for the journal. I'm very tired now. Dean hesitated, clearly wanting to say more but recognizing the dismissal. Of course, I'll let you rest. At the door, he paused. I meant what I said, Piper. I am sorry, and I do want to support you through this. After he left, I reached for the journal, examining it in the soft light of my bedside lamp. It was beautiful. Leather-bound with my initials embossed on the cover. Exactly the kind of thoughtful gift Dean excelled at selecting. Inside the front cover he had written in his neat script, "One day at a time. All my love, Dean." I traced the words with my finger, wondering if he had meant them or if they were just another performance. Another attempt to maintain the facade of the devoted husband while secretly dismantling our financial future. It didn't matter. In less than 48 hours, Dean would return from his next late meeting to find something very different waiting for him. The conversation we'd just had might be one of our last moments of relative normalcy, a strange, strained normalcy, but normalcy nonetheless. I placed the journal on my nightstand and turned out the light, allowing the exhaustion of the day to pull me toward sleep. My last conscious thought was not of cancer or chemotherapy, or even Dean's betrayal, but of the plan I had set in motion and the reckoning that awaited him. The day after my first chemotherapy session, I woke to the now familiar sensation of Dean tiptoeing around our bedroom, gathering clothes for work while trying not to disturb me. I kept my eyes closed, listening to his muted movements, the soft click of the closet door, the whisper of fabric as he dressed. "I know you're awake," he said softly. I opened my eyes, unsurprised that he could still read me so well after all these years. "Morning. How do you feel?" His concern seemed genuine, his eyes carefully scanning my face for signs of distress. "Like I've been hit by a truck," I admitted. The fatigue had settled into my bones, accompanied by a dull headache, and a slight queasiness that hovered at the edges of my awareness. Dean's brow furrowed. "Should I stay home today? I can reschedule my meetings." For a moment, I almost said yes. Despite everything, there was something comforting about the thought of having someone care for me during this vulnerable time. But that someone wouldn't really be Dean. It would be the performance of Dean, the husband who hadn't betrayed me, hadn't lied repeatedly, hadn't drained our savings for purposes still unknown. "No," I said, pushing myself up against the pillows. "Jenna's coming over later. I'll be fine." He hesitated, then nodded. "I left anti-nausea medication and crackers on your nightstand. The doctor said small bites every few hours might help, even if you don't feel hungry." I glanced at the careful arrangement: pills, water, bland crackers on a small plate. "Thank you." "I should be home by 7, he said, adjusting his tie. Unless you have another late meeting," I finished for him, unable to keep the edge from my voice. Dean had the grace to look ashamed. "I'll try to wrap up early." After he left, I lay still for several minutes, gathering my strength. The cocktail of chemicals now circulating through my system made every movement an effort, but I had work to do. Work that couldn't wait for a day when I felt better. I managed a shower, leaning against the tile when dizziness threatened to overwhelm me. Afterward, I dressed in comfortable clothes and made my way downstairs, pausing frequently to rest. By the time I reached the kitchen, I was breathing heavily, as if I'd run a marathon instead of descending a single flight of stairs. I brewed tea and forced down a few bites of toast, then called Calvin Friedman. "I need to accelerate our timeline," I said when he answered. "I don't have the energy for a prolonged investigation." Calvin's voice was calm, steady. "What are you thinking?" "I want to file as soon as possible, use what we already have, and pursue the rest through discovery." "Piper, we still don't know the full extent of the financial situation. Without understanding where that money has gone—" "I understand the risks," I interrupted. "But my health is deteriorating faster than expected. I need this resolved while I still have the capacity to deal with it." A brief silence. "All right, I'll prepare the filing for tomorrow. Melanie has enough to establish a preliminary financial picture, though she recommends further investigation. Tell her to continue her work. I just want the legal process started. Now." After ending the call, I texted Jenna. "Change of plans. Can you come at 11 instead of 2? Need your help with something important." Her reply was immediate. "On my way." While waiting for Jenna, I began the task I'd been dreading. Moving methodically through the house, I documented our possessions, taking photos, making notes about purchase dates and values, creating an inventory of the life Dean and I had built together. Each item carried memories. The dining table where we'd hosted countless dinner parties, the artwork we'd collected on our travels, the comfortable sectional sofa where we'd spent quiet evenings reading beside each other. By the time Jenna arrived, I had filled 3 pages in the journal Dean had given me, an irony not lost on me. "What's going on?" she asked, taking in my pale face and the paper spread across the coffee table. "I'm filing for divorce tomorrow," I said simply. "And I need your help preparing a few things first." Jenna's eyes widened, but she didn't question my decision. "Just tell me what you need." Together, we tackled the remaining tasks on my list. Jenna drove me to the bank, where I removed important documents and family heirlooms from our safe deposit box. We stopped at a new bank, where I opened accounts solely in my name. At my attorney's office, I signed the prepared divorce papers, my signature steady despite the tremor in my hands. "He'll be served tomorrow," Calvin confirmed, placing the documents in a folder. "Are you sure you want to be present when it happens?" I nodded firmly. Absolutely sure. The final stop was perhaps the most difficult. "I need to go to the mountain property," I told Jenna as we left Calvin's office. "Piper, that's a 2-hour drive. You should be resting." "I know, but I need to see it one more time, before." Jenna didn't argue further, understanding this wasn't just a practical errand but something deeper, a goodbye to the future dean, and I had planned together the retirement dream that would never materialize. The drive was quiet, Jenna respectfully allowing me space with my thoughts. As we turned onto the gravel road leading to our property, memories flooded back. Dean and I walking the land together, planning the cabin layout, imagining quiet evenings on the porch watching the sunset over the mountains. "It's just up ahead," I directed, pointing to the small clearing where we usually parked. The 5 acres looked exactly as I remembered: towering pines, the gentle slope down to the small stream, the natural clearing where we'd planned to build. I stood at the edge of the property, breathing in the crisp mountain air, letting it clear my lungs and my mind. "It's beautiful," Jenna said softly, coming to stand beside me. "I can see why you loved it." "We were going to retire here," I explained, my voice catching slightly. "Build a cabin, grow old together watching the seasons change." I gestured toward the far side of the clearing. The main living area would face west, to catch the sunset. The kitchen would have windows overlooking the stream. The bedrooms would be at the back, with skylights for stargazing. I could still see it so clearly: the life we'd planned, the future we'd sacrificed for. All those years of careful saving, of choosing long-term security over immediate gratification, all destroyed by Dean's betrayal. "Do you want to walk around?" Jenna asked. I shook my head. "No. I've seen what I needed to see." I took one last look at the property, committing it to memory. "Let's go home." The return drive felt longer, fatigue settling heavily over me. By the time we reached my house, it was nearly 5 o'clock. Dean wouldn't be home for hours yet, if he came home at all. "Are you sure you want to do this now?" Jenna asked as she helped me inside. "You could wait until you're feeling stronger." "No," I said firmly. "It has to be tomorrow. I need this finished so I can focus on getting well." She nodded, understanding. "What's left on your list?" "Just one thing." I moved to my desk, removing a sealed envelope from the drawer. "I need you to take this to someone for me." Jenna took the envelope, glancing at the name written on the front. "Ashley Monroe? Are you kidding me?" "It's important," I insisted. "She deserves to know the truth, too." "Piper, I don't think—" "Please, Jenna. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't necessary." She sighed but tucked the envelope into her purse. "Fine. But I don't like it." After Jenna left, promising to return early the next morning, I surveyed the house. One last time. Everything was in place. The stage was set. Tomorrow, Dean would finally face the consequences of his actions. I climbed the stairs slowly, each step requiring conscious effort. In our bedroom, I changed into pajamas and settled into bed, my body demanding rest, even as my mind continued to race with plans and contingencies. The journal Dean had given me sat on the nightstand. I picked it up, turning to a fresh page, and began to write. Not symptoms or medication schedules as he had intended, but a different kind of record. My feelings, my fears, my determination to survive both cancer and betrayal. I wrote until my eyes grew too heavy to continue, until the pen slipped from my fingers as exhaustion finally claimed me. My last conscious thought was of tomorrow, of Dean's face when he realized that his carefully constructed world of lies was about to collapse completely. Morning arrived with a gentle chime from my phone, a reminder about a medication I needed to take with food. I blinked awake, momentarily disoriented, then remembered. Today was the day. Dean's side of the bed was undisturbed. He hadn't come home last night, or if he had, he'd slept in the guest room. I pushed myself up slowly, testing my body's response. The nausea had intensified overnight, a constant rolling in my stomach that threatened to become something more urgent at any moment. My mouth was dry, with a metallic taste that no amount of water seemed to wash away, a common side effect of the chemotherapy drugs. I managed to get dressed in comfortable but presentable clothes, soft black pants with an elastic waist, a loose, cashmere sweater in a deep teal that had once been Dean's favorite color on me. I secured a patterned scarf around my head, covering the thinning hair that would soon be gone entirely. A touch of makeup helped disguise the pallor of my skin, the dark circles under my eyes. The doorbell rang at precisely 9 o'clock. Jenna, punctual as always, stood on the porch with a paper bag from my favorite bakery. "Ginger scones," she explained, following me inside. The nurse said ginger might help with nausea. I smiled gratefully, though the thought of food made my stomach clench. "Thank you. Coffee? Already had some, but you sit. I'll make you tea." We moved through the familiar morning routine, Jenna bustling in the kitchen, me checking emails at the dining table. The normalcy felt surreal given what was about to happen. "Did you deliver the envelope?" I asked as she set a steaming mug before me. Jenna nodded. "Left it with her assistant. She was in meetings all day." I sipped the tea, the warmth soothing my raw throat. "Did Dean call or text last night?" "No. Did you expect him to?" I shrugged. "Not really. He's been sleeping at the office some nights, or so he claims." The doorbell rang again at 9:30. Calvin Friedman stood on the porch, elegant as always in a tailored gray suit, accompanied by a younger man carrying a briefcase. "This is David Torres, my associate," Calvin introduced us. "He'll be handling some of the procedural aspects of your case." I invited them in, showing them to the living room where I'd prepared documents on the coffee table. Calvin reviewed everything. One more time. His expression professional but compassionate. "Are you absolutely certain you want to proceed this way?" he asked. "We could arrange for your husband to be served at his office." "I'm sure," I said firmly. "I want to see his face when he realizes what's happening." Calvin nodded, understanding. "Mr. Wallace confirmed he'll be home at 11 for your doctor's appointment. David will wait outside until then and serve the papers when he arrives." At 10:30, Melanie Chen joined us, bringing additional financial documentation. "I've identified several irregular patterns," she explained, spreading papers across the dining table. "Beyond the transfers to A. Monroe, there are cash withdrawals and wire transfers to accounts I haven't been able to trace yet." I studied the highlighted figures, the complex web of transactions that represented Dean's financial betrayal. "How much in total?" "Based on what I've found so far, approximately $120,000 over the past year." Melanie's precise tone couldn't disguise the significance of the amount. "That's considerably more than the A. Monroe transfers alone." The number hit me like a physical blow. $120,000, nearly our entire emergency fund, a significant portion of what we'd saved for retirement, money that should have been available for my medical expenses, for the uncertain future. I now faced alone. "Can we recover it?" I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. "Some of it, potentially," Calvin replied. "Once we file, we can freeze remaining assets and pursue discovery to locate the missing funds. If he's violated fiduciary duty, which appears likely, the court typically awards an uneven distribution to compensate the injured spouse." At precisely 11 o'clock, we heard the sound of tires on the driveway. David nodded to Calvin and stepped outside, positioning himself near the front walk. Through the living room window, I watched Dean's car pull up. He emerged looking tired but composed, checking his watch as he walked toward the house. When David approached him, Dean's posture shifted from relaxed to alert, his body language becoming defensive as he realized this wasn't a chance encounter. The front door opened, and Dean entered, his face pale, expression taut. He stopped abruptly. When he saw the gathering in the living room, Calvin and Melanie with their professional composure, Jenna with her protective anger, and me at the center of it all, calmer than I had felt in weeks. "What is this?" Dean asked, the papers David had handed him clutched in one hand. "Piper, what's going on?" "I believe you've just been served with divorce papers," I said evenly. "Mr. Friedman here is my attorney. Ms. Chen is the forensic accountant who's been tracking the money you've been diverting from our savings." Dean's eyes darted from face to face, landing finally on the papers in his hand. "This is ridiculous. We can talk about this." "We're past talking," I interrupted. "We're at the point of financial disclosure and legal separation." He took a step toward me, stopping when Jenna moved protectively to my side. "Piper, you're not thinking clearly. The chemo drugs, the stress of your diagnosis." "Don't you dare," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "Don't you dare suggest this is about my illness clouding my judgment. This is about the $120,000 you've stolen from our savings. This is about your affair with Ashley Monroe while I was scheduling cancer treatments. This is about the fact that every word out of your mouth for the past 6 months has been a lie." Dean flinched as if I'd slapped him. "I can explain." "To the court," Calvin interjected smoothly. "Any explanation you wish to provide should go through your attorney to mine." Dean's face hardened, the mask of contrition slipping to reveal something colder beneath. "You think this is how to handle this? Ambushing me with lawyers and accusations while you're sick? While we should be focused on your treatment?" "My treatment is my concern," I replied. "And yes, this is exactly how to handle a husband who betrays his wife both emotionally and financially during a health crisis." Dean turned his attention to Calvin. "I want to speak to my wife alone." "Mrs. Wallace has indicated she doesn't wish to speak with you privately," Calvin replied. "Any communication should go through proper legal channels." Dean's jaw tightened, a muscle twitching at his temple, a tell I recognized from our rare but intense arguments over the years. He was recalculating, shifting strategies. "Fine," he said finally. "I'll have my attorney contact yours." He turned to leave, then paused, looking back at me. "This isn't what I wanted, Piper. None of it." "And yet it's what you chose," I replied. "Every step of the way, Dean. Every lie, every betrayal. Those were your choices." After he left, the room remained silent for several moments. I realized I was trembling, whether from the confrontation or the chemotherapy side effects. I couldn't tell. "That went as well as could be expected," Calvin said eventually. "Mr. Torres will file the papers today. We should have a preliminary hearing date within 2 weeks." Jenna helped me to the couch, concern evident in her expression. "You're pale as a ghost. Do you need your medication?" I nodded, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline that had carried me through the confrontation was fading, leaving me hollow and shaky. "He didn't fight back," I observed as Jenna returned with water and pills. "He didn't deny anything." "He was caught off guard," Melanie suggested, gathering her papers. "Men like your husband rely on controlling the narrative. When that control is taken away, they often retreat to regroup." "He'll fight the financial claims," Calvin warned, "especially with the amount involved. We should be prepared for him to deny knowledge of where the money went or to claim it was lost in legitimate investments." I swallowed the medication, leaning back against the cushions. "He knows exactly where every penny went. Dean doesn't make financial mistakes." "People in the midst of affairs often make irrational decisions," Calvin said gently. "Even financial experts." "This wasn't irrational," I insisted. "It was calculated. Dean doesn't do anything without a plan. After Calvin and Melanie left, promising to call with updates once the filing was processed, Jenna insisted I rest. She helped me upstairs to bed, bringing tea and crackers to settle my stomach. "I'm proud of you," she said as she adjusted the pillows behind me. "Standing up to him like that couldn't have been easy." "It wasn't," I admitted. "Part of me still loves who I thought he was." "That's natural," Jenna assured me. "You're mourning the loss of your marriage, the future you planned together. That grief doesn't disappear just because you know the relationship is irreparably damaged." I nodded, grateful for her understanding. I keep wondering if I missed signs earlier, if the man I loved ever really existed, or if it was all a performance from the beginning. "Don't do that to yourself," Jenna said firmly. "Dean made his choices. They weren't because of anything you did or didn't see." She left me to rest, promising to check in later. I dozed fitfully, my dreams a confused tangle of courtrooms and hospital rooms, Dean and doctors circling like adversaries in some complex game where I didn't understand the rules. When I woke, the house was quiet, twilight filtering through the curtains. My phone showed several missed calls, 2 from Dean, which I ignored, and 1 from Calvin, which I returned immediately. "The filing is complete," he informed me. "Dean's attorney has already made contact. Gregory Walsh, competent, but not particularly aggressive. A good sign that Dean isn't planning an all-out legal war." "What happens next?" I asked, my voice rough from sleep. "We wait for their response to our initial claims. In the meantime, the temporary orders should be granted within a few days, which will prevent any further dissipation of assets. After..." We hung up. I checked my messages. A text from Dean. "We need to talk. This isn't what you think." I closed the message without responding, set the phone aside, and closed my eyes again. The confrontation was over. The legal process had begun. Now I needed to focus on the other battle, the one happening inside my body, cell by cell, chemical by chemical, one war at a time. That was all I could handle. Dean Wallace sat in his parked car outside the office building, divorce papers on the passenger seat beside him. His hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles had turned white. The confrontation at the house played on repeat in his mind. Piper's calm voice, her attorney's cool professionalism, the damning financial records spread across the table, $120,000. So she knew about all of it, not just the A. Monroe transfers. He'd been a fool to think he could keep it hidden. His phone rang. Gregory Walsh, the attorney he'd called immediately after leaving the house. "I've reviewed the filing," Walsh said without preamble. "They've got strong evidence of financial misconduct. The forensic accountant they hired is very thorough." Dean closed his eyes. "What are my options?" "Honesty would be a good start," Walsh replied dryly. "I can't defend you effectively if I don't know what I'm defending against." "Where did the money go, Dean?" The question hung in the air. Dean considered lying. He'd become quite good at it these past months. But what was the point now? "Some of it went to Ashley," he admitted. "Gifts, hotels, trips. The rest?" "Yes?" Dean exhaled slowly. "The rest went to Arnold." "Arnold? Your colleague, Arnold Miller?" "Yes. He has something on me. Something that could ruin my career, my reputation." Walsh's voice sharpened. "Are we talking about criminal activity?" "No. Nothing. Like that. It's personal, compromising. Blackmail is a crime, Dean. If Miller is extorting you..." "I can't prove anything," Dean interrupted. "It would be my word against his. And he has evidence." "What kind of evidence?" Dean stared through the windshield at the office building. "Where he'd worked for 15 years, where he'd built his career and reputation. I can't discuss it over the phone." Walsh sighed. "Fine. Meet me at my office in an hour. And Dean, bring all financial records related to these transactions. If we have any hope of mitigating the damage, I need to see everything." After hanging, Up, Dean rested his forehead against the steering wheel. How had everything fallen apart so completely? 6 months ago, his life had been perfect. Successful career, beautiful home, respected position in the community, and Piper, who had trusted him completely. Piper, who was now fighting cancer and preparing for a divorce simultaneously. Piper, whose face when she said every word out of your mouth has been a lie, would haunt him forever. His phone chimed with a text. Ashley. We need to talk. Now. Dean. Stared at the message, remembering the envelope Piper had mentioned sending to Ashley. What had she told her? How much did Ashley know? He considered ignoring the message, but finally typed a response. Can't right now. Meeting attorney. Her reply was immediate. My office. 5 p.m. Don't make me come find you. Dean tossed the phone onto the passenger seat beside the divorce papers. Everything was unraveling at once. His marriage, his affair, his financial deception. And at the center of it all was Arnold Miller, whose smug face appeared daily across the conference table, whose subtle threats had escalated into outright demands, whose knowledge of Dean's darkest secret had turned into a financial stranglehold. The irony was bitter. Dean had always been the careful one, the planner, the man who calculated every risk before acting. Yet he'd made the single most reckless decision of his life on a business trip 4 years ago. Long before Ashley, long before Piper's diagnosis, one night of weakness that Arnold had discovered and held over him ever since. Dean started the car, his decision made. Before meeting Walsh, before facing Ashley, there was someone else he needed to see, the person at the root of everything, the reason he'd begun diverting money in the first place. 20 minutes later, he parked outside a modest apartment building in a quiet neighborhood north of the city. He checked his reflection in the rearview mirror, haggard, eyes bloodshot, the polished financial executive replaced by a haunted man on the verge of losing everything. Dean climbed the external stairs to the second-floor apartment, his footsteps heavy on the metal treads. He knocked on the door marked 2B and waited, heart pounding. The door opened to reveal a young woman in her mid-20s with Dean's hazel eyes and sharp jawline. Her expression shifted from surprise to wariness. Dad? What are you doing here? Anna Monroe Wallace, the daughter no one in Dean's current life knew existed, the secret he'd paid increasingly exorbitant amounts to keep hidden, the mistake from his past that had returned to destroy his future. We need to talk, Dean said, voice rough with emotion. About Arnold, about the money, about everything. Anna stepped back, allowing him to enter the apartment he'd been quietly paying for since she'd reappeared in his life 2 years ago, pregnant and desperate after he'd abandoned her and her mother 23 years earlier. It's over, isn't it? Anna asked quietly. She found out about me. Dean shook his head. Not yet, but she will soon. And when she does? He trailed off, unable to finish the thought. When Piper discovered that the real A. Monroe wasn't Ashley but Anna, the daughter Dean had never told her about, the family he'd hidden while building a new life, there would be no possibility of forgiveness. Not just for the financial betrayal, but for the 17 years of lies about who he truly was. 3 days after serving Dean with divorce papers, I sat in the oncologist's office reviewing my treatment plan. The first round of chemotherapy had hit me harder than expected, leaving me weak and nauseated, my body struggling to recover before the next assault. Your blood counts are lower than we'd like, Dr. Harrison explained, studying my lab results with a slight frown. We may need to adjust the dosage for your next treatment. I nodded, too exhausted to feel concerned. Between the physical toll of cancer treatment and the emotional aftermath of confronting Dean, I had little energy left for worry. Is there someone staying with you? The doctor asked. These side effects can be unpredictable, and I'd prefer you weren't alone. My friend Jenna has been staying over, I replied, and I've hired a part-time caregiver for when she can't be there. Dr. Harrison nodded approval. Good. And your husband? The question hung in the air, laden with complicated emotions. We're separated, I said simply. Divorce proceedings have begun. If the doctor was surprised, she didn't show it. I see. Well, make sure you have adequate support. Cancer treatment is challenging enough without adding additional stressors. Additional stressors. Such a clinical term for the implosion of my marriage, the discovery of years of deception, the ongoing legal battle over finances. I almost laughed at the understatement. When I returned home, Calvin was waiting in the driveway, his expression unreadable. I felt a flutter of anxiety. Unexpected visits from attorneys rarely brought good news. What's happened? I asked as Jenna helped me from the car. We should talk inside, Calvin replied, following us into the house. Once settled in the living room, Calvin opened his briefcase. I've received a settlement offer from Dean's attorney. It's unusual. He handed me a document, which I scanned quickly, my heart racing as I absorbed the contents. Dean was offering a complete financial disclosure, the return of all diverted funds, and an uncontested divorce with a settlement heavily weighted in my favor. Why? I asked, looking up at Calvin. Why would he give up so easily? There's a condition, Calvin said, pointing to a clause near the end of the document. He wants a private meeting with you, alone. I frowned. That's it? A conversation in exchange for everything we've been fighting for? Apparently. Of course, I advised against meeting without representation, but he's insistent. Says there's something you need to know that can only be shared in person. I considered the offer, turning it over in my mind. It seemed too good to be true. Dean surrendering without a fight, returning the diverted funds, agreeing to my terms. What could he possibly have to say that would warrant such concessions? When? I asked finally. Tomorrow, if you're up to it. At my office, despite his request for privacy. I'll be in the next room. After Calvin left, Jenna voiced her concerns. I don't trust this. Dean's never given up anything without a strategy. I know, I agreed. But I'm too tired to play games. If he wants to talk, fine. If he's willing to return the money and end this quickly, even better. That night, as Jenna slept in the guest room, I received a text from an unknown number. Before you meet with Dean, there's something you should know. This is Anna Monroe. I stared at the message, my fatigue instantly replaced by alertness. A. Monroe, not Ashley, but Anna. Someone I'd never heard of, someone significant enough to have. Received $75,000 of our savings. I hesitated, then replied, Who are you? The response came quickly. Someone Dean has been hiding from you for your entire marriage. I'm sorry for my part in the deception. Meet me at Cascade Coffee on 4th 9 a.m. tomorrow. Sleep was impossible after that. My mind raced with possibilities, each more troubling than the last. Was Anna another affair? A secret business partner? Someone Dean had wronged who was now seeking revenge? By morning, I was exhausted but determined. I told Jenna about the text, ignoring her objections as I dressed for the meeting. This could be a trap, she argued. Some kind of setup Dean orchestrated. I need to know, I insisted. Before I meet with him, I need all the facts. Cascade Coffee was busy with morning customers when I arrived. I scanned the room, unsure who I was looking for, when a young woman approached my table. She was in her mid-20s, slim with dark side hair and familiar hazel eyes, Dean's eyes. Mrs. Wallace? She asked tentatively. I'm Anna. My breath caught. The resemblance was unmistakable. The shape of her jaw, the set of her shoulders, even the way she held her coffee cup mirrored Dean's mannerisms. You're his daughter, I said, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. Anna nodded, sliding into the chair across from me. He doesn't know I'm meeting you. He'd be furious if he found out. How? I began, then stopped, recalibrating every assumption I'd made about Dean's betrayal. "How old are you?" 26, she replied. "He left my mother and me when I was 3, paid child support but otherwise disappeared from our lives, until 2 years ago when I found him again." The timeline fell into place with devastating clarity. Dean was 47 now. He would have been 21 when Anna was born, years before I met him. "He never told me he had a child," I said numbly. "He never told anyone," Anna replied. "Not his parents, not his friends, and certainly not you." Dean Wallace, respected financial advisor, built his entire identity on leaving his past behind, including me. I struggled to process this revelation, to align it with the man I thought I knew. "The money," I said finally. "The transfers to A. Monroe. That was you?" She nodded, her expression complicated with guilt and defiance. "Not just for me. For my son, Dean's grandson. Carter is 4. She pulled out her phone, showing me a photo of a smiling little boy with Dean's eyes. "When I found Dean 2 years ago, I was struggling. Carter has medical issues. Nothing life-threatening, but expensive. I needed help. So Dean gave you money. From our savings," I concluded. "Without telling me about you. Without telling me I had a stepson." "Yes," Anna admitted. "And then his boss found out somehow and started blackmailing him. That's where the rest of the money went." As I stared at the photo of the grandson I never knew existed, one thought crystallized amid the chaos of revelations. Dean's betrayal went far deeper than an affair or financial misconduct. He had hidden an entire family, an entire identity, for the duration of our marriage. Every memory, every moment I thought we'd shared completely, had been shadowed by this fundamental deception. "I have to go," I said suddenly, gathering my things. "I'm meeting Dean in an hour." Anna reached across the table, her fingers brushing my arm. "He's not a good man," she said softly. "But he's not the monster you think he is either. Just complicated. Broken." I nodded, unable to find words adequate for the moment. As I stood to leave, one question remained. "Why tell me now?" Anna's expression hardened slightly. "Because I'm tired of being the secret, and because you deserve the truth before you decide his fate." 6 months after discovering Dean's web of deception, I sat in the oncologist's office receiving very different news than I had expected. "The scans are clear," Dr. Harrison said, smiling as she showed me the images. "No detectable cancer. You've responded remarkably well to treatment." Relief washed over me, so intense I felt lightheaded. After 6 grueling rounds of chemotherapy, 35 radiation sessions, and countless days of pain and exhaustion, my body had won its battle. The cancer was gone, at least for now. "We'll continue monitoring, of course," Dr. Harrison cautioned. "Monthly checkups for the first year, then quarterly. But Piper, this is the outcome we hoped for." I nodded, tears blurring my vision. "Thank you for everything." Outside the hospital, I sat in my car, allowing the news to sink in. My phone buzzed with a calendar reminder. Final divorce hearing, 2 days away. After months of negotiations, discoveries, and revelations, the legal dismantling of my marriage was nearly complete. The meeting with Dean that day after learning about Anna had been surprisingly anticlimactic. He had arrived at Calvin's office. Looking haggard and defeated, the confident financial advisor replaced by a man crushed under the weight of his own deceptions. "I see you've met Anna," he had said immediately, noting something in my expression. "Yes, your daughter, and your grandson." Dean had nodded, shoulders slumping. "Then you know everything." "Not everything," I'd countered. "I know you had a child. You abandoned, who found you 2 years ago needing help. I know you secretly gave her money from our savings instead of simply telling me the truth. I know your boss discovered your secret and blackmailed you. What I don't know is why, Dean. Why build our entire marriage on a lie? His explanation had been both predictable and heartbreaking. A young man terrified of responsibility, running from his mistakes, creating a new identity untethered from his past. Then meeting me, falling in love, and finding himself trapped in a deception that grew more impossible to reveal with each passing year. I convinced myself I was protecting you, he had said, that knowing about Anna would only hurt you, that the past was better left buried. And Ashley? I had asked. How does she fit into your narrative of protection? Dean had looked away, unable to meet my eyes. A distraction, a complication I never intended. When your diagnosis came, I ended it immediately. After she ended, it with you mean? He hadn't denied it, just nodded wearily. I've made a complete financial disclosure, he had said, changing the subject. Everything is there. The payments to Anna, the blackmail to Arnold, all of it. I've liquidated my personal investments to replace what I took from our savings. In the end, the divorce settlement had been straightforward. Dean surrendered claim to our home, returned all diverted funds plus interest, and agreed to continue, providing health insurance coverage through his employer for the full 3 years allowed by law. In exchange, I relinquished any claim to his retirement accounts and agreed not to pursue criminal charges for the financial misconduct. Now, 6 months later, I was cancer-free and legally single again at 45. I started the car and headed, not toward the home I had shared with Dean, but to my new condo overlooking the lake. The space was smaller but filled with light, with large windows and an open floor plan I had designed myself. Nothing in it reminded me of my former life. New furniture, new art, new beginning. Jenna was waiting when I arrived, pacing anxiously, in the living room. Well? She demanded as soon as I opened the door. All clear, I said, smiling as she rushed to embrace me. I knew it, she said fiercely. I just knew it. We celebrated with sparkling cider, alcohol still too harsh for my recovering system, and takeout from my favorite Thai restaurant, my appetite finally returning after months of treatment-induced nausea. So what now? Jenna asked as we relaxed. On my balcony, watching the sunset paint the lake in shades of gold and pink. Back to work? Travel? Romance? I laughed. One step at a time. Work first. I've already lined up 2 new consulting clients. After that, who knows? The truth was, I had plans forming that I wasn't quite ready to share. Ideas that had taken root during the long hours of treatment, when I'd had nothing to do but think about what I truly wanted from whatever life remained to me. The mountain property, which I had received in the divorce settlement, had been sold. The proceeds split between 2 investments: a college fund for Carter, Dean's grandson, and technically my step-grandson, and seed money for a foundation supporting cancer patients facing financial hardship during treatment. I had met with Carter, twice now, this bright-eyed boy who shared Dean's features but none of his guarded nature. Anna and I had formed a cautious relationship. Not friendship exactly, but a mutual respect born from shared experience with Dean's deception. The journal Dean had given me the day of my first chemotherapy session had become my constant companion. Its pages filled not just with medical notes, but with reflections, plans, and increasingly, hope. The latest entry, written just that morning, read, "Today I find out if the cancer is gone. Regardless, I am not the same woman who received that diagnosis 9 months ago. The piper who trusted blindly, who built her life around someone else's. Dreams. Who feared uncertainty. She's gone, replaced by someone stronger. Someone who knows that betrayal doesn't define you, that loss can be a beginning, that the most valuable plans are the ones you make for yourself." As twilight settled, over the lake I felt a sense of peace that had been absent for so long. The cancer was gone. The marriage was over. The deception was exposed. What remained was possibility, and for the first time in years, that felt like enough. 2 years after my diagnosis, I stood at the podium of a hotel ballroom, facing an audience of cancer survivors, medical professionals, and donors gathered for the inaugural fundraiser of the Wallace Collins Financial Stability Foundation. When I was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer, I began, my voice steady. I thought the disease was my greatest challenge. I was wrong. For many patients, the financial toxicity of cancer treatment is equally devastating. Medical bills, lost income, depleted savings. These financial side effects can persist long after the physical symptoms have been treated. The foundation had grown from idea to reality more quickly than I'd anticipated, fueled by my professional connections and personal story. Our mission was simple: to provide emergency financial assistance to cancer patients, helping them maintain stability during treatment and recovery. No one should have to choose between medical care and paying their mortgage, I continued. No one should face bankruptcy because they chose to fight for their life. From the front row, Jenna gave me an encouraging smile. Beside her sat Anna and Carter, now 6 and thriving after successful treatment for his developmental issues. My relationship with them had evolved into something none of us could have predicted. Not quite family, but connected by shared experience and genuine care. Dean was not present. We had spoken only through attorneys since the divorce was finalized, though I knew from Anna that he had relocated to Chicago, accepted a position with less prestige but no connection to his past, and was slowly rebuilding his relationship with his daughter and grandson. Surprisingly, it had been Anna who suggested naming the foundation partially after him. Whatever his flaws, she had argued, the money that started this came from both of you, and maybe attaching his name to something good is a way of transforming what happened, I had agreed, recognizing the wisdom in her suggestion. Healing, I had learned, sometimes required acknowledging even the painful pieces of your past. After the fundraiser, which exceeded our financial goals by nearly 30%, I returned to my condo alone, kicking off my heels and pouring a small glass of wine, a luxury recently reintroduced to my life with my doctor's blessing. On my desk sat a small stack of mail forwarded from my old address. Bills, advertisements, and an envelope with handwriting I instantly recognized. Dean's precise script, unchanged in the years since I'd last seen it. I hesitated before opening it, uncertain what he could possibly have to say that would matter now. Inside was a brief note and a check for an amount that made me catch my breath. $500,000, made out to the Wallace Collins Foundation. The note read simply, "I can never undo the harm I caused, but perhaps this can help prevent others from facing what you did alone. The money comes from my inheritance after my mother's passing. Clean funds, not tainted by deception. No response needed or expected. I just wanted you to know I've been following your work from afar, and I'm genuinely proud of what you've built, from the ashes of what I destroyed." Dean. I set the check and note aside, emotions too complex to name rising and falling like waves. Not forgiveness. I had made peace with the fact that some betrayals lie beyond forgiveness. But perhaps understanding, recognition that people are neither wholly good nor wholly evil, that even those who hurt us deeply can evolve, can seek to balance their karmic ledger in whatever way they can. My phone chimed with a message from Dr. Timothy Reeves, the oncologist, who had joined our foundation's board of directors and who, over the past year, had become something more than a colleague. "Dinner tomorrow? That new place on the waterfront?" I smiled as I typed my response. Looking forward to it. Later that evening, I sat on my balcony watching boats move across the darkening lake. My body bore the scars of cancer, the surgical scar on my breast, the lingering effects of treatment on my energy and stamina. My heart carried different scars, the memory of betrayal, the knowledge that someone I had trusted completely had lived a double life at my side. Yet here I was, not just surviving, but thriving. My consulting business had evolved to focus on healthcare organizations, leveraging my personal experience to improve patient financial services. The foundation was making a tangible difference in people's lives. And personally, I was cautiously exploring the possibility of new love, moving forward at my own pace with eyes wide open. I thought about the woman I had been 3 years ago, secure, in her marriage, confident in her future, unaware of the dual catastrophes waiting to upend everything she thought she knew. That woman was gone, replaced by someone more resilient, more compassionate, and paradoxically, more hopeful. Dean's betrayal had shattered the life we built together. Cancer had threatened the very foundation of my existence. Either alone would have been devastating. Together, they should have destroyed me completely. Instead, they had forced me to rebuild from the ground up, to examine what truly mattered, to create a life entirely my own. The journal Dean had given me sat on the small table beside me, its pages now filled from cover to cover with the chronicle of my journey. I had started a new one the day after receiving my cancer-free diagnosis, its first entry a quote I had discovered during treatment. Rock bottom became the solid foundation on which I rebuilt my life. I traced the words with my finger, their truth resonating through every cell of my being. My husband had spent our savings on his secret daughter while carrying on an affair. What he had found when he came home, a woman determined to survive both his betrayal and cancer, a woman capable of transforming devastating loss into meaningful purpose, had indeed left him speechless. But it was my voice that mattered now. My story, my future. And that future, despite everything, or perhaps because of everything, shone brighter than I ever could have imagined. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.